Now let's get right into those regulations. Oh, but first we need to set some ground rules. This is intended to be an OSHA encapsulation video, specifically OSHA 1910, which is general industry. We're not going to cover construction. We're not going to cover mining or maritime or any of the other weird spots, just 1910. Specifically, we're going to be targeting the office personnel and then also the warehouse personnel. Now, you need to understand that 1910 also covers other industries like logging, right? Like cutting trees and turning them into lumber and all that. It covers heavy chemicals, those big giant refineries that you see out in the middle of nowhere, and they're turning some random ore into some awesome chemical that we use in Windex and bleach and all that kind of stuff. This video is intended to be a bird's eye view walkthrough and to kind of push away all the rules that really don't apply to office and warehouse specifically. But also, I've worked in the industry long enough to know that sometimes the office people will send someone outside to do something in the yard that doesn't exactly comply with office, or will send someone over to unload a truck when we don't even have a warehouse person here. So I may touch something that for you it feels like that doesn't apply at all, and it's because I want to make sure in your mind as the facility responsible, when this situation comes up, your brain can click and go, wait a minute, there's rules about this, and you can dig deeper. I'm not going to dig deep into the rules specifically in those weird situations, but I will touch it just so you can have that recall of, wait a minute, there's rules to play by, I need to go look them up. I cannot do a video less than probably 100 hours long that covers all of OSHA, but then I wouldn't even be explaining your specific little nuances that apply to you. So again, all of this is going to be very bird's eye view. Another caveat, OSHA will sometimes reference other regulations outside of OSHA 1910. A perfect example of this is, shall have pressure relief devices installed and maintained in accordance with Compressed Gas Association, so CGA, pamphlet S 1.1.1963. That's referencing something outside of OSHA. I will make videos later on that actually capture what information is inside of this, but because this video is intended for the generic audience, you may not have a forklift in your warehouse that actually has a propane tank, so you wouldn't care about this. So in order not to waste an abundance of people's time, we're only going to list that OSHA's referencing something out, so we'll talk about it, and then we'll move on. We're not actually going to dig. Later on in different videos, we'll dig. But do keep in mind, when we reference one of these other regulations, most of them are locked behind paywalls. Some of them up to $300 per regulation that you're getting, and it's going to be updated in 4 to 10 years. And the last disclaimer, you need to talk to the competent person for your company, for your situation, for your facility, before you make any decision. This video is a training aid. It is not the end-all, say-all for your specific situation. You're the facility responsible. You're the person responsible. You need to be able to read. You need to be able to talk. And if you need guidance, get the guidance from the people in your company, in your chain of command. And if that doesn't work, you can always reach out to subject matter experts. First, we're going to do a brief overview of a safety data sheet. Every chemical we have has to have a safety data sheet on it. And on that safety data sheet will be the information. That's the common names, the address of the place that made it, that kind of thing, the manufacturer. And then you're going to have the hazard identification information, which will include things like a danger word and don't drink and keep it out of the eyes, that kind of stuff. What's all the stuff that makes up that chemical? A pretty detailed layout of what's actually in it. First aid measures, firefighting measures, accidental release measures, handling and storage, how to store it, kind of important, and then exposure, so if someone does get exposed to it, as well as how to prevent the exposure. And then the properties, which includes color, what does it smell like, flammability, melting and freezing points, all that kind of information. And then finally, how bad does it hurt the environment, and then how do you dispose of it? Transportation information, this is you moving it from facility to facility, especially in large bulks. Regulatory information, this is what other known government or state entities have captured that there's a specific ruling on this kind of product. So like, let's say California has special rules, it'll list out the California regulation. And then this is just a little extra section where they can write extra things, including what's the last date of the revision of that safety data sheet. Stability and reactivity, this is a big one with, for example, gasoline and some kinds of fertilizer. They react together. And so anything that this reacts with this other thing, don't store them near each other. This is where you're going to find that stuff. Toxicology information, this is at what point does it really start hurting your body? At what point does it cause death? That kind of thing. Compressed gases. Inspection of compressed gas cylinders. Each employer shall determine that compressed gas cylinders under their control are in a safe condition to the extent that you can do by visually inspecting it. There's a reference here to DOT 49 CFR 171 through 179 and 14 CFR 103. I believe that's airplanes and trains, so it doesn't apply, but even if it did, we're not going to go into it now. And then as previously mentioned, CGA C6 1968 and C8 1962. The in-plant handling, storage, and utilization of all compressed gases in cylinders, portable tanks, blah, 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 shall be in accordance with CGA Pamphlet P1 1965. Now, don't get hung up on the words in plant. Like, wait a minute, we don't have a giant facility. We're not doing chemicals. That is your building that you have a warehouse, office, anything that you have a gas cylinder, like maybe helium for filling up a balloon or propane for running a forklift. Any place you have a gas cylinder must comply with CGA Pamphlet P1 1965. Safety relief devices for compressed gas containers, specifically compressed gas cylinders, shall have pressure relief devices installed and again maintained according to CGA Pamphlet 1, 1963 and 1965 and S1, 2, 1963. Flammable liquids. Aerosol. Now, I don't think we really need to actually define aerosol. I put it up here so that way it's very clear. Yes, most likely that's spray paint too. And usually it's not even the actual paint coming out that's flammable. It's the thing that's propelling it. It's the propellant that's flammable. I've seen deodorant that's flammable. Closed container. Anytime you hear the word closed container, it means has a lid and neither liquid nor vapor will escape from it under ordinary temperatures. And the reason we're covering this is because most of your little oiler cans or your middle use application devices are not going to count as closed unless vapor cannot get out of it. Office occupancy shall mean the occupancy or use of a building or structure or any portion thereof for the transaction of business. Ignition sources. In locations where flammable vapors may be present, precautions shall be taken. So the big question here is the facility responsible is you need to go out, you need to look at where your flammable liquids are, and what are you doing to prevent someone from lighting that stuff up. If there's a sparks area or a welding area or a place you do maintenance regularly, maybe we should make sure there's no flammable liquids anywhere near that. And if you have a smoking area, especially if it's inside of a building, maybe we should make sure there's zero chance that flammable liquids can be in that or anywhere near that smoking area. Because remember, with gasoline, it's not just the liquid that's going to burst into flames, it's literally the vapor that's going to catch fire. Flammable liquid categories. There's category 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to go through the categories and then we'll have a little talk about them. Cat 1 shall include liquids having flash points below 73.4 and having a boiling point at or below 95 degrees. Cat 2 is the same as Cat 1, except now we have a boiling point above 95 degrees. Cat 3 flammable liquids is above 73.4 and at or below 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Cat 4 flammable liquids have a flash point above 140 degrees Fahrenheit, so this thing can take some heat. Now, I did skip some parts above, and I'm gonna skip this one here too, but I did want to draw your attention to sometimes there's little things that can move it up into a 3 or down into a 4, or how you handle these weird chemicals. It's your job as a facility responsible to check the chemicals, check the safety data sheet, look at how you're using the product and what it's going to be exposed to, and then apply the classification after that. All right, let's wrap our minds around category flammable liquids. Take a look at this graph here. Category 1s, even when it's really cold, they'll light on fire. And then as we progressively step up, you'll have things like Windex. Well, Windex is usually not very flammable. That's probably going to be category 4 or not even rated as a flammable liquid at all. So here's your flammable liquids chart made easy. And if we look at the rule of thumb ratings for gasoline, you're looking at -43. So that is definitely a flam class 1. Another resource you have is go to the safety data sheet. This is the safety data sheet for gasoline from Shell. And in section 2, it tells you it is a category 1 flammable liquid. And then keep looking and it'll tell you it's an extremely flammable liquid and vapor. And it should give you a bunch of information for how to handle this correctly. Wear protective gloves, protective clothing, eye protection, and face protection. The safety data sheet is telling you when you handle gasoline, you need to wear all these things. And then it'll also have storage considerations. Keep cool. Store in a well-ventilated place. Store locked up, meaning don't just let anybody come get to this. Not more than 60 gallons of category 1, 2, or 3 flamm liquids, nor more than 120 gallons of category 4 flamm liquids may be stored in a storage cabinet. No, you cannot just go build your own redneck storage cabinet. It has to comply with NFPA 251-1969, as well as this regulation. And it needs to warn of the most hazardous chemical inside, which is flammable. Keep fire away. Flammable liquids. There's a whole bunch of rules for the metal cabinets. Rather than building my own, if I was you, I would go to your favorite online shopping store, type in flammable locker or flammable cabinet, look around till you find something you like, and that's going to fit your needs. Look specifically for the specifications where the manufacturer is saying this is OSHA compliant or NFPA or whatever applies to you, and then come back to the regulations and make sure what you're buying is going to be compliant. I would not just buy something because somebody somewhere on the internet said this is compliant. The previous one didn't even tell us what OSHA it complies with. Which one? Mining? Logging? What? OSHA what? Find the product you want, come back to the regulations, make sure it's compliant yourself. Flammable liquids being stored inside of a building. Flammable liquids, including stock for sale, shall not be stored so as to limit use of exit stairways or areas normally used for safe egress of people. Now, there are a bunch of rules and regulations on exactly what kind of containers you can store flammable liquids in, but as a rule of thumb, if I can get it at a civilian gas station or at Home Depot, then it's probably meant for somebody's home use, not for work use. Whereas if you type into any search engine, DOT compliant gas can, it's gonna look more like this. Do you see the difference between these two different searches? Most likely that gas station gas can that you have is not gonna be OSHA compliant. Office occupancy. Oh, wait a minute. Now we're looking at why we discussed the definition of that. Storage shall be prohibited except that which is required for maintenance and operation of building and operation of equipment. Such storage shall be kept in closed metal containers, stored in the storage cabinet, or in a safety cans, or inside of a storage room, not having a door that opens into the portion of the building used by the public. The big violation I've seen on this one is barbecues. A lot of our areas like to have barbecues for our employees, and that's wonderful. But that lighter fluid, right? The charcoal lighter fluid, you cannot store that stuff inside the office. That is not required for maintenance nor operation of the building. And it's certainly not required for the operation of equipment. That needs to be out in the warehouse area, inside of a yellow flam cabinet. Safety can shall mean an approved container of not more than 5 gallons capacity, having a spring closing lid and spout cover, and so designed that it will safely relieve internal pressure when subjected to fire exposure. As a good rule of thumb, DOT compliant, Department of Transportation compliant gas can. Container shall mean any can, barrel, or drum. And before we start talking about a portable tank, that means it's over 60 gallons and not intended for fixed installations. And the reason we're hitting this is because a lot of y'all are going to try to say, well, no, this isn't a container. This is a portable tank. All right, is it over 60 gallons and not intended for permanent installation? Because then it is a portable tank, and now you have different rules you have to play by, and you're not going to like them. And we continue on with flammable liquids. A maximum of 1,100 gallons of flammable liquids may be located adjacent to buildings. Granted, I know that we shouldn't be containing in this massive a quantity, but just in case you ever start getting close to it, understand 1,100 gallons is the cutoff that you can contain adjacent to a building. And your flammable liquids area must have spill containment and security and some kind of a fire extinguisher thing located near. But if you read down here, the wording of this is suitable fire control devices such as small hose or portable fire extinguisher shall be available at locations where flammable liquids are stored. That means if you have flammable liquids, you have to have a fire extinguisher. So if you have flammable liquids inside of a storage room, outside of the door, right, the door to the room, within 10 feet of that door on the outside, you have to have a fire extinguisher. For any category 1, 2, or 3 flammable liquids that you're just storing inside of the building but not in a room, within 10 to 25 feet, not 3 feet, not 27 feet, but 10 to 25 feet, you got to have a fire extinguisher. And there should never be smoking inside of our buildings anyways, especially if you have flammable liquids. And continuing with flammable liquids, this one is for any kind of hot work in the area, right? So anything that's producing a flame or anything that produces sparks, the on-site supervisor, so you, the building responsible, right? The on-site supervisor needs to inspect the area and ensure that none of those sparks are going to get anywhere near the flammable stuff. Maintenance, and this is more maintenance of vehicles, forklifts, that kind of thing. Any maintenance that's done shall be in accordance with established procedures. What this is telling you is maintenance has to be as per the manufacturer's recommendations. This is OSHA's way of saying manufacturer's recommendations, and whatever maintenance you're doing, you can't just drop 5 gallons of liquids on the ground. But in case you do have spills, they shall be cleaned up promptly. Any firefighting equipment specifically assigned for flammable liquids, you can't have it blocked. You can't have the walkways to it blocked. You have to be able to grab that fire extinguisher stuff and put out the fire. Waste and residue. Combustible waste material, this is cardboard boxes, paper, rags, that kind of stuff, and residues in the building or unit operating area shall be kept to a minimum, stored in a covered metal receptacle, and disposed of daily. Now, there is something to be said that if you have one room, one big giant room in your building, and that is where all of the flammable liquids are at, and then in a different room, that's where you have your combustible trash at, okay, I could see that. But if you have flammable liquids in the same room as where you're throwing all your cardboard boxes, that's a problem unless you have it in a metal receptacle with a lid. Any building that has flammable liquids, you got to keep the weeds, the trash, and any combustible materials, you got to keep them taken care of. You can't have overgrowth happening around a building that has flammable liquids in it. And everybody's favorite, HAZCOM, hazard communication. And in the preamble, the purpose of this section is to ensure that the hazards of all chemicals are classified and the information concerning the classified hazard is transmitted to employees. This is where OSHA says it's supposed to coincide with GHS, global harmonization, that's the pictograms and all that stuff. And here is a black and white statement. The transmittal of information is to be accomplished by means of comprehensive hazard communication programs, that means a HAZCOM program, which are to include container labeling, other forms of warning, safety data sheets, and employee training. This is black and white what has to happen. Now, a lot of this statement is about the manufacturers that make chemicals, but there is a portion here of all employers to provide information to their employees about the hazardous chemicals to which they are exposed by means of HAZCOM program, labels, and other forms of warning, safety data sheets, and information and training. Now, this little part is the what if factor, and it's the, well, what if one of my employees brings something on site and I don't have any clue about it? Okay. This section applies to any chemical which is known to be present in the workplace in such a manner that employees may be exposed under normal conditions of use or in a foreseeable emergency. So if your employee just happens to bring something and you have no clue, well, okay, we didn't have to train on that because we had no clue. We had no way to predict whether that employee was going to bring that on site or not. A lot of logic has to be used here, and it needs to be logic that experts will testify, yeah, that's logical. An example of this could be, well, we didn't expect the receptionist to bring formaldehyde to the workplace, so we didn't train on that. It's not a, well, we didn't expect them to bring bleach to clean. Like, bleach to clean, that's a logical thing. We should have trained on that. This is a black and white statement stating that chemical is not just liquids. Chemicals are any substance or mixture of substances. Could be powder, could be a gas, and of course it could be a liquid. And let's get into the written HAZCOM program. HAZCOM continued. Employers shall develop, implement, and maintain at each workplace a written HAZCOM program, which has these elements, which we're going to cover in detail. A list of hazardous chemicals known to be present using the product identifier that is referenced on the safety data sheet. So we have to have the chemical name and the product identifier on the inventory list. Now, there is a small stipulation here of the list can either be for that work area or it can be for the entire building. This is where OSHA says you can't just have random bottles of liquids, right? You got to label all of the hazardous chemicals. So it has to be labeled with either some kind of a product identifier and words, picture symbols, that kind of thing. A perfect example is Dove soap. We all know what this image means. Now, we still have to do some kind of training on it. We have to have safety data sheets on it, but as far as labeling the container, we could just put Dove soap on there, so long as it complies with the common knowledge of hazards of Dove soap. If it's some weird high-grade industrial version of Dove soap, no, we have to put something else. But the normal buy in the grocery store Dove soap, if we just throw this label on this container, we could probably be okay. The employer shall not remove or deface any existing labels. You cannot take labels off of containers And the implication here is that if you have a container that came from the store, from the supplier or whatever, that has a damaged label that's illegible, right? You can't make out what it is. You as the employer have to fix that, or you need to dispose of the chemical. The employer shall ensure that workplace labels or other forms of warning are legible in English and prominently displayed on the container, or readily available in the work area throughout the shift. Employers having employees who speak other languages may add the information in their language to the material presented, as long as the information is presented in English as well. And now we move into safety data sheets. And continuing HAZCOM, the employer shall maintain in the workplace copies of required safety data sheets for each hazardous chemical, and shall ensure they are readily accessible during each work shift to employees when they are in their work areas. We can use electronic versions. Employers shall provide employees with effective information and training on hazardous chemicals in their work area. Notice here it doesn't say and that they have to use. It is chemicals in their work area. So if the employee is in the building and the chemical is in the building and the employee is allowed to go into that side of the building, you have to train them on it. And again, just like we always do, you either train them what to do or you train them what not to do. Meaning, if you have an office person, you can train them. You're not allowed to go into the warehouse, and then you don't have to train them on all the warehouse chemicals. But if you don't specifically train them on not going into the warehouse, and more importantly, you don't let them go into the warehouse, right? So just doing the training and then we look the other way when they go in there, that's not going to work for this. It is, we don't let office people into the warehouse, period, and thus we don't have to train them for that kind of stuff. Another example could be, we do not let our office people go into the janitor closet. That is a no-go area. We have specific people that we've trained to use cleaning chemicals, and those are the only people that use cleaning chemicals, with one tiny exception, and that is bloodborne pathogens, which we'll cover later. Now, when do we train our employees? When they're initially assigned to the building, when we hire them, day one. If that chemical is going to be in their work area, you got to do something. You either train them how to handle it safely, or you train them you're not allowed to be anywhere near it day one. Or when there's a new chemical hazard present, meaning if your person who orders all the chemicals has a new chemical that they brought into the work area, you got to retrain. Employees shall be informed of the requirements of this section, meaning you have to tell them any operations in their work area where hazardous chemicals are present, and where's the HAZCOM binder, where's the chemical inventory, and where are the safety data sheets right now. Now that was what they had to be informed of. This is employee training shall include at least. What are all the chemicals that are going to be in their work area, and how is that employee going to know that that chemical is in use? And this is the lion's share of the training. What are all of the health hazards associated with all the chemicals in their work area? And we're still on HAZCOM, specifically training. You have to train them on how to protect themselves, whether this is procedures, PPE, fans, whatever method it is that while they're using this chemical, they're not going to get hurt. You have to train them on how to protect themselves. And you also have to train them on the details of the HAZCOM program. This includes explanation of the labels on shipped containers, workplace labeling, safety data sheets, and a whole bunch of words that say how to read the safety data sheet. So it's the safety data sheet and then how to read it. So anyone who's ever seen my safety data sheet training and thought, wow, this is excessive, it's because OSHA says you have to do this exact thing. You, at the employer, have to train exactly like this. Permit required confined spaces, and yes, I know this is excessive, but as the employer and as the building responsible, I need you to have kind of an idea of what confined spaces are and when things apply and what applies. So first of all, you may also be in charge of construction people, and please understand, this does not apply. The things I'm about to tell you here does not apply to the construction people on a construction job site. This applies to your building. And continuing into permit required confined spaces. So the first and real thing that you have to master, you must master, is confined space. It is not the term that you grew up knowing the word confined. This is an OSHA definition, confined space. And that is a space that is large enough and so configured that an employee can bodily enter and perform assigned work. So they have to be able to enter the space. And Notice the word and here, and I know it sounds silly for me to focus, but and. It is in addition to, has limited or restricted means for entry or exit. Examples of this are vessels, silos, storage bins, so on and so forth, and is not designed for continuous employee occupancy. So the rule of thumb here to capture all of this is, can you get into it? Does it have restricted means of access and egress? Is it not designed for humans? And I know that sounds weird, but it needs to be a yes, I can get into it. Yes, it has a restricted entry. And yes, it is not designed for humans. And if that is the case, then it is an OSHA-defined confined space, which means we need to look at the hazards. Now, for those who like a good argument, OSHA says we're not going to argue about anything. Just like electrical, you are considered to be entering the minute any part of your body breaks the plane into that space. And down here, it's non-permit confined space. So if you ever see that term, it just means a confined space that does not have the potential of causing death or serious physical harm due to hazards. And continuing on with permit required confined spaces, this is the big crux right here. That is a confined space that has one or more of the followings. And this is where a lot of people have problems. They think, oh, well, there's an area over here and it might have bad air, or there might be some crazy goblin in the corner, and it does not even meet the requirements of a confined space. So it can never be a permit required confined space because it's not even a confined space as per OSHA's definition. So it must be a confined space first, and then we look at the hazards. And the hazards are pretty easy. It's, could it have bad air, or could it have material that could potentially engulf the entrant, like, you know, the whole corn silo thing where all the stuff's falling down on you and you can't get out, or has an internal configuration so that someone can get trapped or asphyxiated. A perfect example would be a pipe where you're wiggling in and you get stuck and you can't get out, that whole claustrophobic thing. Or contains any other recognized serious safety or health hazards. So overall, anything that can seriously hurt or kill somebody and it's a confined space means it's now a permit required confined space, and you need to stop what you're doing and call the confined space competent person for your company. Confined spaces continued. Now keep in mind, this is not intended to be a training session for permit required confined spaces or confined spaces. This is facility responsible. So we're only going to cover it a bird's eye view. If you feel like you've run into a situation, you need to call the competent person for your company for confined spaces and get them involved. But at a bird's eye view, we're going to go real quick over some of the rules that have to do with confined spaces. The employer shall evaluate the workplace to determine if any spaces are permit required confined spaces. So you need to go look around and know every single nook and cranny of your building and the surrounding area. There's a fun flow chart you could use, but it looks like it's dated to the 1950s. If you do find any permit required confined spaces, you have to post signage. Now, if you, as the employer, decide, you know what, we're not going to let any of our people in there, great. But you have to do things to barricade people from entering it. It's not just signage, it's signage plus barricades. Now, here's the crazy one. If you're going to let someone come in, like a third-party person, like a contractor, come in and do work, and they're going to get into that confined space, you've got some rules that you have to play by. You have to tell them there's a permit required confined space right there, and they have to comply with the permit space program. You have to tell them what the hazards are in there and the experiences you've had with that space. Apprise the contractor of any precautions or procedures that the host employer has implemented for the protection of employees in or near permit spaces where the contract personnel will be working. This is so that way they don't take down the signage or disassemble the barricades, leave it open, and now an employee wanders in and everybody's like, well, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. No, it is your fault because you're the host employer. It is their fault because they're the contractor, and both of y'all have hurt this person. And coordinate entry operations with the contractor. This is when both your people and their people are going to get in at the same time. You have to coordinate your activities. This especially matters when you're going to have multiple contractors working in the same permit required confined space, because one can create a hazard that both of them are not prepared for. More PRCS and specifically host employer responsibilities. Once the contractor's done working, you got to talk to them and find out all the information about what they ran into down there and anything that they may have done to create or remove hazards. All employers must comply with permit space requirements and obtain all the information regarding the space before you let your people get into it, coordinate entry operations with the host employer, talk to the host employer about your permit space program and any hazards that you ran into or created in that space. Why are we talking about all this stuff? Well, it's pretty simple. You might be in charge of service crews. And when service crews, the construction is done and now they're going back for warranty or something like that, something that is not part of construction, these are the rules they have to comply with out in the field, and you may need to have stock of items, or you may actually be in charge of these service crews. Please understand, when construction stops, that's where 1910 takes over. Confined space training. Again, either training what to do or what not to do. Train your people that any place that has the permit required confined space or confined space signage, they're not allowed to go. If you do that, you're good to go. You don't have to train them anymore. But if there's any reason why any of your people should have to get in there, or again, like we mentioned, the service crews or people that are going to work in other facilities that are not under your control, now we need to look at the training. Or as the regulation states, training should be provided to each affected employee. Before you let him get in a confined space / permit required confined space, first, you need to train them on all aspects of your permit space program and all information required to be developed by this section. That means you don't just pull out your company's safety manual and start training them off of that. You have to train them on the actual regulations to prove to them you've accomplished all of the requirements required by OSHA. Electrical general. Only listed or labeled equipment shall be installed and used in accordance with any instructions, including in the listing and labeling. Now, if I have to explain what this means, that means you're probably not an actual electrician, and this is the whole point. Letting a warehouse person do electrical repairs is probably going to end bad, and there's no way they're going to try to comply with any of the rules because they have no clue what they are. So only electricians do electrical work, and only approved, listed, or labeled equipment is to be installed, and it has to be installed as per its listing and labeling. Electrical equipment shall be installed in a neat and workmanlike manner. Yes, that is an OSHA regulation, so your jumble of wires is not acceptable. Open holes in boxes, panels, or whatever have to have blanks. There shall be no damaged parts that may adversely affect safe operation or mechanical strength of the equipment, such as broken, bent, cut, or deteriorated by corrosion, chemical action, or overheating. Electrical equipment shall be firmly secured to the surface on which it is mounted, meaning nothing should wiggle. Electrical equipment may not be used unless the following markings have been placed on the equipment, period. The manufacturer's marking, we've got to be able to figure out who made this thing, voltage, current, wattage, or other necessary ratings. Now, these stickers don't really come into play until we're doing maintenance or we're changing something or fixing something, and so it'll be an electrician that's usually exposed to this, but we, as the facility responsible employer, must make sure the stickers are there. And what we're really looking for is how much juice is running through that box. The marking must be durable. This means no pencils or dry erase markers or anything crazy. Now, this one's more for the electricians, but as a facility responsible, each service feeder and branch circuit at its disconnecting means or overcurrent device shall be legibly marked to indicate its purpose, unless located and arranged so the purpose is evident. To put it in non-electrician terms, the breaker in your home, in your house, you know how it has labels for all of the breakers, right? This one goes to the washer and dryer. This one goes there. That's not just the electricians being nice. That's because they have to. And that same mentality of if there's a disconnecting place, there needs to be a label of what that disconnects unless it is obvious, like a direct line going into a machine. And here's a big one that a lot of non-electricians fail on a lot, and that is sufficient access and working space to electrical equipment. You cannot put a bunch of trash cans and a bunch of random crap in front of the electrical equipment. You, as the facility responsible, have to make sure there's access to and from every piece of electrical equipment. Transformers, panels, any place that an electrician might have to get over there to do something to make the building safe for your people, you have to keep it clear. We typically do about a 36-inch walkway to and from and around, but different situations may call for different protocols. If you stick with 36 inches around to and from, you should be good to go. This is why most companies will put some kind of a black and yellow caution tape on the ground or a red tape on the ground and make a weird pattern with it, and that is to keep people from putting stuff there. And continuing electrical general, anything operating at 50 volts or more has to be in a box to where you can't accidentally come into contact with those hot parts, those live parts. The following requirements apply to all entrances to all buildings, rooms, or enclosures containing exposed live parts or exposed conductors operating at 600 volts nominal. The entrances to these areas shall be kept locked unless you have a qualified person who's literally keeping an eye on that area. Permanent and conspicuous warning signs shall be provided. So this is the big thing of why you'll see electrical rooms that say danger, high voltage, keep out. But if you look at the scope, this is only for areas that have exposed conductors or live parts. But here's the problem. Whenever someone comes in to perform maintenance on this area, well, they have to have permanent signage up. Does that make sense? So how are they going to have permanent signage up while they're performing maintenance if you don't have it up permanently? Electrical training. People who have to deal with electricity as part of their job, you have to train them, but also anyone who's a facility responsible has to receive training as well. And this section is for the unqualified person. So this is, you're not an electrician, or you're not an electrician who's been trained to deal with 600 volts or whatever, but you still have some form of responsibility. You have to receive training, which will keep you safe in your assigned work duty. The qualified person, i.e., the person who is going to do work on your panel, who's going to do work on your lights, your switches, your whatever, they must be trained in the skills and techniques necessary to distinguish exposed live parts from other parts of electrical equipment. They must be trained in the skills and techniques necessary to determine the nominal voltage of exposed live parts, and they must be trained in the clearance distances specified in 1910-333 Charlie and the corresponding voltages to which the qualified person will be exposed. So when you grab your warehouse person and you have them go do electrical work for you, I'm going to come back and say, well, wait a minute, where's their training? And you say, well, he was an electrician for 20 years. That's not what the regulation states. It's not just they were something for X amount of time. It is be trained in and familiar with the following stuff. So where's the training at? Where did you, as the facility responsible, either give the training or ensure the training was done before you assign that person with repair duties or ballast changes or whatever crazy stuff you're going to have them do? Emergency action plans shall be in writing. Minimal elements, procedures for reporting a fire or other emergency, procedures for emergency evacuation, including the type of evacuation and the exit route assignments. Now, I know that sounds weird, but if there's a tornado coming, don't sound the alarm for fire because you don't want everyone running out into the tornado, right? Procedures to be followed by employees who remain to operate critical plant operations before they evacuate. So close or lock doors or whatever on your way out. Procedures to account for all employees after the evacuation. Procedures to be followed by employees performing rescue or medical duties if that is something you're assigning. Name or job title of every employee who may be contacted by employees who need more information about the plan or an explanation of their duties under this plan. An employer must have and maintain an employee alarm system. The employee alarm system must use a distinct signal for each purpose and comply with the requirements of 1910-165. Let's go look at 165. However loud the area is inside the building, you must be able to hear that alarm over however loud it is. Whatever the alarm is, it cannot sound like any other thing in that area, and everybody's got to know when they hear whatever that sound is, it's time to evacuate or there's an emergency. As the employer, we have to tell our employees, if you see an emergency, how are you going to tell the employer? How are you going to tell me, the facility responsible, that there's a fire? And what are the procedures for sounding the emergency alarm in the workplace? Now, 1910-165 has more on the alarm, except a lot of people are renting the building that they're actually working in. They don't actually own the building, and so it'll be very hard for them to do these modifications or be compliant because it's not their building. But unfortunately, you're the employer. You're the one responsible for the employees and employee safety, including things like this. You may have to get creative. If you do own the building, there's additional requirements, including testing every 2 months. Training. An employer must designate and train employees to assist in safe and orderly evacuation of other employees. Reviewing the plan. An employer must review the emergency action plan with each employee covered by the plan when the plan is developed or on that employee's first day of work in your area. Yes, day one, you've got to cover the emergency action plan with them. Or when the employee's responsibilities under the plan change and when the plan is changed. Exit routes and emergency planning. An exit door must be unlocked. Employees must be able to open an exit door from the inside at all times without keys, tools, or special knowledge. Objects that project into the exit route must not reduce the width of the exit route to less than the minimal width required for exit routes, which is commonly 36 inches, but maybe a tiny bit different based on your jurisdiction, your area, all the rules that apply to you. Exit routes must be kept free of explosive or highly flammable furnishings or other decorations. And in case it hadn't been made clear, exit routes must be free and unobstructive. Doesn't matter if it's permanent or temporary, you cannot block an exit route for any reason at all. They have to be open. Things like sprinklers, alarm systems, fire door, exit lighting must be in proper working order at all times. Exit routes must be adequately lighted so that an employee with normal vision can see along the exit route. Each exit must be clearly visible and marked by a sign reading exit. Exit routes and emergency planning. Each doorway or passage along an exit access that could be mistaken for an exit must be marked not an exit or similar designation. Each exit sign must be illuminated to a surface value of at least 5 foot candles by a reliable source and be distinctive in color. Each exit sign must have the word exit in plainly legible letters not less than 6 inches high, with the principal strokes of the letter in the word exit not less than 3/4 of an inch wide. Fire prevention plans. A fire prevention plan must be in writing, be kept in the workplace, and be made available to employees for review. The plan must include a list of all major fire hazards, proper handling and storage procedures for hazardous materials, potential ignition sources and their control, and the types of fire protection equipment necessary to control each major hazard. Procedures to control accumulations of flammable and combustible waste materials. Procedures for regular maintenance of safeguards installed on heat-producing equipment to prevent the accidental ignition of combustible materials. The name or job title of employees responsible for maintaining equipment to prevent the control source of ignition or fires, and the name or job title of employees responsible for the control of fuel source hazards. An employer must inform employees upon initial assignment to a job of the fire hazards to which they are exposed. So on the first day before they go to work, you've got to train them. Handling materials general. Where mechanical handling equipment is used, sufficient safe clearances shall be allowed for aisles, at loading docks, through doorways, and wherever turns or passages must be made. Aisles and passageways shall be kept clear, in good repair, with no obstructions across or in aisles that could create a hazard. Permanent aisles and passageways shall be appropriately marked. Storage of materials shall not create a hazard. Bags, containers, bundles, etc. stored in tiers shall be stacked, blocked, interlocked, and limited in height so that they are stable and secure against slide or collapse. Storage areas shall be kept free of accumulation of materials that constitute hazards from tripping, fire, explosion, or pest harborage. Vegetation control will be exercised when necessary. Clearance signs to warn of clearance limits shall be provided. Covers and/or guardrails shall be provided to protect personnel from the hazards of open pits, tanks, vats, ditches, etc. Portable fire extinguishers. This section talks about if there's a fire, an emergency, but we don't have fire extinguishers, so this is void because we're going to have fire extinguishers in every one of our buildings. This one talks about the plan if only we have a few people that are trained to deal with the fire extinguishers and everybody else evacuates, which that's not what we're going to do. We're going to train everybody. The reason I left these two in here so that way you see there are other options for the train everybody system, but the train everybody system is the easiest. It covers everybody. So we're going to stick with that in this training. The employer shall provide portable fire extinguishers and shall mount, locate, and identify them so that they are readily accessible to employees without subjecting the employees to possible injury. Only approved portable fire extinguishers shall be used. Fire extinguishers must be fully charged and operable condition and kept in their designated places at all times except obviously during use. We're going to take just a moment to talk about fire extinguisher types. There are 5 types of fire extinguishers: A, B, C, D, and K, and a rule of thumb for remembering what those stand for is A is all the debris, B is bottles, C is circuits, D is dang hot, and K is kitchen. Or A is for combustible fires, B is for chemical fires, C is for electrical fires, D is for metal fires, and K is for cooking grease fires. But the rule of thumb works for me. Again, it's all the debris, bottles, circuits, dang hot, and kitchen. And with this understanding, let's move on. The employer shall distribute portable fire extinguishers for use by employees on Class A fires so that the travel distance for employees to any extinguisher is 75 feet or less. And again, we know Class A is all the debris or combustibles. The employer shall distribute portable fire extinguishers for use by employees on Class B fires so that the travel distance from the Class B hazard area to any extinguisher is 50 feet. So if you're storing chemicals, you've got to have a fire extinguisher within 50 feet of those chemicals if they constitute a fire hazard. Continuing on with portable fire extinguishers, the employer shall distribute portable fire extinguishers used for Class C hazards on the basis of appropriate pattern for the existing Class A or B. Again, this is a Class C is for circuits, which is electrical, and that can easily look like a jumbled mess, but the Class C fire extinguisher, the electrical fire extinguisher, is the least effective at putting out anything else, whereas the Class A and the Class B fire extinguishers can also put out Class Cs, and that's what they're recognizing here is you don't need to overlap all these fire extinguishers based on the type, because your A can probably put out a C fire, your B can probably put out a C fire, so based off of how you have your A's and B's laid out, you may or may not need to put a C in there. But if the only fire hazard you have in there is the potential of electrical fires, like a server room, there's no combustible materials anywhere, there's no chemicals anywhere, it's just a server room, okay, you need to put a Class C fire extinguisher right there. Class D, we are not going to discuss. That is metal, and there should absolutely be nobody using this training video that it has the potential of metal fires. But just in case you get into some weirdness, I threw it up here. The employer shall be responsible for the inspection, maintenance, and testing of all portable fire extinguishers in the workplace. So, no blaming the city, no blaming the owner of the building. If you're just the people renting in it, you're the employer. It is your job to inspect those fire extinguishers. The employer shall ensure that blah, blah, blah. It has to be checked annually. There's an annual check that has to be done, usually by a third-party company that'll come in, perform a little check, and then move on down the road. But there's also a 6-year cycle that all fire extinguishers are on, where every 6 years they expire and they have to be dumped out. But your yearly people will usually tell you, hey, this one's expired. And we're going to take this opportunity to talk about the fire extinguisher's user manual. That's right. When that fire extinguisher was first sold by the manufacturer, it came with the user manual, and you can usually find them online. But if you look at the fire extinguisher's user manual, just like the GFCI user manual or many other things that are life-saving devices or safety related, it has to be inspected every 30 days. Or I can go check NFPA 10, which says every 30 days and every year and every 6 years. These are the cycles for inspection, and the employer is responsible for them. Where the employer has provided portable fire extinguishers for employees' use in the workplace, the employer shall also provide an educational program to familiarize employees with the general principles of fire extinguisher use and the hazards involved with the incipient stage firefighting. This training is to be done day one, the employee's first day that they're working in your facility, and then additionally every single year. The employer shall provide employees who have been designated to use firefighting equipment as part of an emergency action plan with training in the use of the appropriate equipment. Portable fire extinguishers continued on. That training for the people on the emergency action plan, that'll be provided upon initial assignment to the designated group and then every year. Sanitation. Housekeeping. All places of employment shall be kept clean to the extent that the nature of the work allows. The floor of every workroom shall be maintained so as far as practicable in dry condition. Where wet processes are used, drainage shall be maintained, and false floors, platforms, mats, or other dry standing places shall be provided. Where practicable or appropriate waterproof footwear shall be provided. To facilitate cleaning, every floor, workplace, and passageway shall be kept free of protruding nails, splinters, loose boards, and unnecessary holes and openings. Any receptacle used for, and this is just a fancy word for organic solid or liquid waste, or refuse shall be so constructed that it does not leak and may be thoroughly cleaned and maintained in a sanitary condition. A good example of this is a lot of our offices and warehouses have break rooms, and in those break rooms, there's a common gathering area with a trash can in it. And the real question is, if an employee has an excess amount of food and they don't want it, where are they going to throw that trash away? Such a receptacle shall be equipped with a solid, tight-fitting cover unless it can be maintained in a sanitary condition without a cover. All sweepings, solid or liquid wastes, refuse, and garbage shall be removed in such a manner as to avoid creating a menace to health and as often as necessary or appropriate to maintain the place of employment in a sanitary condition. Every enclosed workplace shall be so constructed, equipped, and maintained so far as reasonably practicable as to prevent the entrance or harborage of rodents, insects, or other vermin. A continuing and effective extermination program shall be instituted where their presence is detected. So if you got an office and you've got a rat problem, you have to deal with it. You can't just keep sitting there going, oh, well, they just keep coming. We put out some trap. No, you need to call an exterminator and deal with it. Employees should not have to come into work and clean rat feces off their desk every day. That is disgusting, highly inappropriate, and if you just keep letting it happen, that's an OSHA violation. Notice the words here are effective extermination program. Sanitation continued. Water supply, potable water. Potable water shall be provided in all places of employment for drinking, washing of the person, cooking, washing of foods, washing of cooking or eating utensils, washing of food preparation or processing premises, and personal service rooms. Portable drinking water dispensers shall be designed, constructed, and serviced so that sanitary conditions are maintained, shall be capable of being closed, and shall be equipped with a tap. And I'm a big fan of just throwing this regulation right in the trash and saying there will be no water coolers with a tap in this facility or in this building. Because the question comes up of what's in that container before we put the liquid? Who cleaned the container? How often is it cleaned? What agent is the container cleaned with? Where'd the water come from? How long has the water been sitting there? Has anybody come and walked by and dripped something in there? Remember, just one drop of oil can contaminate up to like 26 gallons of water. And the person you had who filled up all the water, how clean were their hands? What procedure are they following to make sure that we aren't giving our employees contaminated water? That's why I wish we could just throw this regulation out and say, this is unacceptable. We're not going to have these in the workplace. Open containers such as barrels, pails, or tanks for drinking water from which the water must be dipped or poured, whether or not they are fitted with a cover, are prohibited. And this may sound outdated to a lot of people, but you know, at the holiday Christmas party, you know that big punch bowl? That's an OSHA violation. A common drinking cup and other common utensils are prohibited. Toilet facilities. The number of facilities to be provided for each sex shall be based on the number of employees of that sex for whom the facilities are furnished. So however many girls we have and however many boys we have, that's how you do the math. And then it tells us to go look at this fantastic chart. So 1 to 15 males, you must have at least one toilet. 16 to 35 males, you must have 2, and then also the same for females. So if you have a building with, 38 males, you have to have 3 toilets, but there is a stipulation under asterisk 1, and that is where toilet facilities will not be used by women, urinals may be provided so long as you don't come down below 2/3 of the minimum specified. Meaning, if it's specified that we have to have 3 toilets, for men, we could do 2 toilets and 1 urinal. But also we need to understand the difference in a regulation versus just a bad idea. Look here, can you imagine 150 people using 6 bathrooms? Does that make sense? And that's where we really need to pay attention. Are we going for compliance or are we going to try to take care of our people? Nobody in their right mind thinks 150 people are going to work with 6 bathrooms. Sanitation continued. The requirements of the toilets and all that do not apply to mobile crews so long as they have access to nearby toilet facilities. This is kind of like a gas station kind of stuff. As long as they have the ability to go to a gas station to use the bathroom, then you're good to go. But if they don't, now you have to do something about it. Sewage disposal methods shall not endanger the health of employees. Washing facilities. Washing facilities shall be maintained in a sanitary condition, meaning you got to keep your bathrooms clean. The big failure I've seen on this one is people will say, oh, well, the cleaning people come on Saturday. That is your contract. You, the facility person, set that contract up, or your company did, and there's a dirty bathroom here. We don't wait till Saturday. We have to clean it. OSHA is not going to go, oh, Saturday? That's when the cleaning people, okay, good to go. We'll come back then. They're not going to care about your deals you have worked out with other companies. What they're going to care about is employees exposed to a dirty bathroom and you're the boss. Every bathroom shall be provided with hot and cold running water or room temperature running water. Hand soap or similar cleansing agents shall be provided, and your people have to have some way of drying their hands, whether it's an air blower or the paper towels or something. Nobody can eat in a bathroom or anywhere that's exposed to a toxic material. You have to have trash cans for the disposal of food waste, and the number and size of them shall be as per their usage so that they don't get over full. And they have to be emptied at least once a day. Now, there is a good argument here to be made of, well, I have to empty all my trash cans every day? No. Specifically, OSHA here is calling out food. So if you have a trash can in your kitchen area or in your break area where people put food in, it has to be emptied every day. There's no letting it fill up and letting the whole office smell horrible. They have to be emptied every day. More importantly, you need to train your people to never put food waste in non-trash cans that get emptied every day. Does that make sense? So your food waste trash cans get emptied every day. All the other ones, they can be emptied as they get full or on whatever cycle. But if it's food waste, it has to be emptied every day. Sanitation continued. No food or beverages shall be stored in toilet rooms or in any area exposed to toxic materials. All right, now this one everybody needs to pay attention to. All employee food service facilities and operations shall be carried out in accordance with sound hygienic principles. In a nutshell, especially, and I know you're probably not a food company, but in a nutshell, especially if you're going to have a barbecue or you're going to have a weekly lunch or whatever, every bit of handling of the food shall be done in such a manner as to protect against human contamination. The food shall be wholesome, free from spoilage, shall be processed, prepared, handled, and stored in a non-contaminated manner. To put it shortly, you cannot touch other people's food without cleansing your hands, wearing gloves, all that stuff that you see the McDonald's people doing. Think of it this way. If you'd get pissed off if you saw someone at a restaurant handling your food in the manner that you do, you should probably fix yourself because it's an OSHA violation. And this brings in the next question of, well, chances are you're the facility person, which means you're not going to probably be the person handling the food. So where's the training on this exact stuff for whoever's handling the food? And yes, this includes bringing donuts for your people, bringing enchiladas for your people. I'm in Texas. We love enchiladas. How is it being taken care of? How's it being handled? And where's the training on it? Walking, working surfaces, general requirements. All places of employment, passageways, storerooms, service rooms, and walking, working surfaces are kept clean in an orderly and sanitary condition. Every place has to be clean. There's no such thing as trash piles. The floor of each workroom is maintained in a clean and, to the extent feasible, in a dry condition. This is where when you have an unboxing area or a packing area, you're going to have some stuff on the floor, especially if you're cutting up wood or anything like that. You're going to have some stuff on the floor. And this is considered to be a workroom. Everywhere else needs to be 100% cleaned, but in your workrooms, you can have a little bit of stuff, but if there's any kind of water, you've got to have drainage, and you've got to have places for people to stand where they're not sloshing around in the water. Either false floors, platforms, or mats must be provided. Surfaces are maintained free of hazards such as sharps, protruding objects, loose boards, corrosions, leaks, spills, snow, and ice. Yes, you cannot have ice on your concrete outside where your employees are going to walk into the building. You, employer, under 1910, have to de-ice your area. You cannot have ice all over the place. You de-icing your front area is not just a nice thing, it's an OSHA regulation. It is the bare basic minimum of what you have to do. Loads, and I know it sounds weird, why are we talking about loads on walking, working surfaces? And you can definitely apply it to any mezzanine area, any raised up above an office kind of area, but you can also apply it to pinpoint overloading, like really heavy warehouse shelves, that kind of thing. The employer must ensure that each walking, working surface can support the maximum intended load for that surface. So think about all the weight you have on that shelf and it's only coming down on 4 legs. You've got to do some thinking about this. Access and egress. The employer must provide and ensure each employee uses a safe means of access and egress to and from walking, working surfaces. This is OSHA's weird way of saying yes, including the parking lot. Walking, working surfaces are inspected regularly and as necessary and maintained in a safe condition. Meaning it's your job as the facility responsible to go check the entire property, including the parking lot, on any walking, working surface. Hazardous conditions on walking, working surfaces are corrected or repaired before an employee uses the walking, working surface again. You cannot just call somebody and say, oh, well, we'll deal with it in a week or 2 weeks. You need to either, they have to be able to use it and it's in a good condition, or you need to put up cones, danger tape, caution, all that stuff. It's either it's safe to use or we've barricaded the area and nobody can use it. There's no such thing as it'll be repaired in a week. When any correction or repair involves the structural integrity of the walking working surface, a qualified person performs or supervises the correction or repair. And you can go ahead and take this word to mean it just like the electrical version of it. It's not just, well, I poured some concrete before, I've done some work with carpentry. No, that doesn't matter. Are you a qualified person? Under OSHA terminology, are you a qualified person to perform this repair and make it safe for people to walk on? Because if you're not, you need to get someone who is. Walking working surfaces continued. The employer must ensure that each employee is trained by a qualified person. Wait a minute. Why would they need to be trained? We're just talking about walking here. Yeah, this is one of the big things that a lot of employers fail right here. And it's they think, well, that's common sense. The problem is we've all been raised 100 different ways. So you tell me what's common about our senses. So let's take a look at what OSHA says you have to train them on. The nature of the fall hazards in the work area and how to recognize them. That's right. That's a fall. Don't go near it. You have to tell them that. And you have to be able to prove that you told them that. The procedures to be followed to minimize those hazards. So the first thing is, A, what are the procedures that you want employees to follow? Can you prove that? And then the next one is, can you prove you trained them on those procedures? The correct procedures for fall protection, if that is the solution you're going for. Personally, if we have a fall hazard, I'm not going to let my employees near it. We're going to put up barricades and that kind of stuff where we don't have the fall hazard. But if you choose for fall protection, you've got to train them on it, but we'll cover that later in fall protection. But let's just pretend we're walking down this road. That includes, but is not limited to, proper hookup, anchoring, tie-off techniques, method of inspection, and storage as specified by the manufacturer. Not just you making up some rules and then generically blasting them out. It is by the manufacturer. You have to train them on that user manual. And you have to train them on it before they use it. Designated area, this is a unique one. This is where we have an area and over here we have people working, but over here we have a fall potential, but they're not going to come close to it. There's more rules to this. I'm just giving you in a nutshell. You can set up a designated area if you have a potential of, let's say, a loading dock area, people that have to get up on the roof for whatever reason. You could set this up. Double check the regulations, talk to the competent person for your company for fall protection, and see if this is acceptable for your specific use. Anytime you see someone failing to follow that procedure, or you have any reason to think that they don't understand or they didn't apply the training, you have to retrain them. Or when situations change in that specific area that could modify, alter, or impact fall protection or the previous training that was delivered, now you got to retrain them to the new standards, the new hazards, the new issues that are going on. And because this is not just fall protection, it's walking working surfaces, that is everything that I've talked about with walking working surfaces. If anything changes, you have to train your people again. Continuing on with the training requirements, so you retrain them when the actual fall protection they have to use changes, or when the employee demonstrates, or for whatever reason you suspect their understanding of the fall protection is lacking, you got to train them again. Training must be understandable. And the real question here is, how can you prove that the employee understood it without questions? And how can you prove that without a test? This is machine guarding, general requirements for all machines. Now, immediately all of our brains are going to think of bandsaws or that kind of thing. And I agree, they apply here also. But we have already discussed how other machines, other than the hardcore ones in the warehouse, OSHA considers those to be machines or tools. So look around your area and see if you need to implement guarding of any kind. The big focus here is nip points, where they can get a little cut, rotating parts, flying chips, sparks, anything like that. And this is a generic statement saying if we can put a guard on it, put a guard on it if it's feasible, but the guard itself shouldn't be a hazard. Point of operation machines, this one's definitely focusing more on the warehousey type of machines. And the big takeaway on this one is a point of operation machine, in the absence of applicable standards, shall be so designed and constructed as to prevent the operator from having any part of their body in the danger zone. This is a lot more towards the press, that you have to reach in and grab something. You should never have your hand in the press area. There should be something to limit to where you can't reach in. You physically cannot reach in there while the machine is operating. Special hand tools. This one is, you know how the big table circular saw? when you're running wood through, okay, it's good to go. But when you're running small pieces, you want to use a push block. And if you don't know what that is, this is what it looks like. You want to use a push block to keep your hand out of the area. What this is talking about is that the little extra things that you use to keep your hands out of that danger zone, those need to be good too. Fan blades. These are the fans above your head. If the fan is lower than 7 feet, it's got to have a protective thing around it. So the big fans that you see in restaurants and that kind of thing, if it's above 7 feet, you should be good. But if it's below 7 feet, you got to have the guards. Now, there's a good argument here to be made of, well, wait a minute, this says above the floor or working level. And that brings in the question of, well, wait a minute, when an employee gets on a ladder, now what's the working level? And that is what needs to be taken into account here. If you've got overhead fans spinning around, what if an employee gets on a ladder? Because now that's their working level. So make sure your fans cannot contact anybody, or maybe make sure it has a guard on it. We've all gone up to a heavy machine and started using it, especially like a grinder or something like that, and it starts wobbling around as we're using it. Anchor down your machines that are not supposed to move. If it is not a moving machine, anchor it down. Guarding of portable power tools, specifically portable circular saws. If the blade has a greater diameter, that's all the way across, than 2 inches, it shall be equipped with a guard. When the tool is withdrawn from the work, the lower guard shall automatically and instantly return to the covering position. So no blocking that thing open. You've got to have a guard that swings back whenever you're done with that cut. All handheld powered circular saws having a blade diameter 2 inches or greater, electric, hydraulic, or pneumatic chainsaws, and percussion tools without positive accessory holding means shall be equipped with a constant pressure switch. That's what this is. Constant pressure switch meaning when I let my finger off, the thing quits moving. You have to have them on if it is any of this. Do not duct tape that constant pressure switch in the active position, or string, or electrical tape, or zip ties, or any other method. Finger pulls the trigger, machine moves, finger lets off, the machine stops moving. That's how it works, or it's an OSHA violation. And pretty much the same rule goes for almost all the other versions of power tools here. Just take a look here if you need to come back and see what needs a constant pressure switch, what doesn't. There is a small stipulation at the bottom of this for having a quick on, quick off situation, but for the most part, everything needs a constant pressure switch. Continuing with portable power tools and guarding, this talks about the smaller ones like a jigsaw or things with less than 2 inches, and they can have an on-off switch kind of situation. Check the user manual. Double check the regulations for your specific situation. I don't know what your crazy self is doing out there, but just make sure you're using the right tool in the right way. Explosive actuated fastening tools. Now I know most of y'all are like, why are we talking about this? Because every now and again, I'll get a division manager or warehouse manager who wants to secure the shelves, the big giant warehouse shelves down to the floor, and they want to use a Hilti gun with the Hilti spikes. And that's fantastic, but that's considered an explosive actuated tool if we're talking about the same one. The definition, according to OSHA, is propel a stud, pin, fastener, or other object for the purpose of affixing it by penetrating to another object shall meet the design requirements of this section, meaning they consider it an explosive actuated fastening tool. And obviously, because of the name of it, it is explosive, meaning there has to be an explosive thing that propels that stud. They must have eye protection, and head and face protection will be based off of the working conditions that you're using and subpart I of OSHA. You can't mix match the gun with different spikes or different projectiles or fasteners as they're actually called. You got to use the right gun with the right fasteners, the right projectiles. Before using it, the operator has to perform a pretty detailed inspection. The gun cannot be left around. It has to be loaded immediately before you're going to use it and never pointed at any human being or dog or anything else that's breathing, ever. The explosive actuated fastening tool shall never be left unattended in a place where it would be available to unauthorized persons. Meaning it's either in your direct supervisory area, meaning you can see that thing, or it's under lock and key. That's it. Hand and portable power tools and other handheld equipment. Each employer shall be responsible for the safe condition of tools and equipment used by employees, including tools and equipment which may be furnished by employees. So it does not matter that they brought it from home, they've used it 100 billion times, they're really good at it. The employer is responsible for the tools they use at work, period. Do not use compressed air to clean clothing. Powered industrial trucks. This is a real fancy way of saying forklifts. There's other things that are in here too, but for the most part, forklifts. Specifically, fuel handling and storage. Handling of gasoline and diesel shall be in accordance with NFPA 30/1969. The storage of liquefied petroleum gas fuel shall be in accordance with NFPA 58/1969. When lighting is less than 2 lumens per square foot, you need to have lighting on the truck itself. Concentration levels of carbon monoxide gas created by forklifts shall not exceed the level specified in 1910-1000. Now, there are two main ways that I've seen people take care of this issue, specifically in a warehouse, and option number one is we open up all the books, we start looking at all the permissible parts per million and the time weight averages, and we look at exposures. We bring someone in to actually do recordings and readings, and we crunch all the numbers to make sure that our people are safe. Option two, which is the massively used one that I've seen, is we just dump a ton of air. We make sure there's good airflow, and I don't mean like, oh, that's a nice breeze. I mean, there's good airflow in that warehouse. Make sure the doors are always up. We never operate the forklift to where carbon monoxide can kill our people. We make sure there's good airflow, plenty of ventilation, but there is an issue that's going to come to you if you're the facility responsible, and that is, well, what happens when it gets cold? Because when it gets cold, people don't like that wind blowing on them. When it gets cold, people want to shut those doors. And now you have a combustion engine kicking out carbon monoxide and your people in the warehouse. And that's where option 3 is usually a really great idea as well, and that's called an electric forklift. But they don't tend to be as robust and able to pick up as much as a diesel gas-powered forklift. But you cannot be kicking out fumes in a closed-up bottle. The brakes of highway trucks shall be set and wheel chocks placed under the rear wheels to prevent trucks from rolling while they are boarded with powered industrial trucks. This is really getting after the truck and trailer situation, and before you drive up onto whatever platform they have, first you need to make sure the platform's safe. Secondly, the emergency brake must be put on. And third, wear the chocks. Now, this isn't on here, but I tell my people, make that driver get where you can see him at all times. Not in the cab of that truck. Make him get out and stand where you can see him. You're the one whose life is being risked. I don't care about pissing off a truck driver. I care about my employee making it home to their babies tonight. Forklift operators have to have training and an evaluation. They have to be trained on that specific operator's manual. They have to receive a certification that has the name of the operator, date of the training, date of the evaluation, and identity of the person doing the training or evaluation. More powered industrial trucks. That certification has to be redone at least every 3 years. Trucks shall not be driven up to anyone standing in front of a bench or other fixed object. The reason OSHA has this specifically called out is because people keep dying this way. Do not drive the vehicle forwards or backwards and put somebody in a pinch point, crush point. No person shall be allowed to stand or pass under the elevated portion of any truck, whether loaded or empty. You cannot get under the forks, ever. This is why when we park our forklift, we make sure the forks are down and the tips of the forks are slightly angled into the ground. When you're going to walk away from the forklift, the load shall be fully lowered, controls shall be put in neutral, power turned off, and the brake set. If it's on an incline, put on the wheel chocks. While operating a forklift and while parking the forklift, you have to keep open the fire aisles, the access to stairways, and fire equipment. You cannot block that while you're operating the forklift. Only stable or safely arranged loads shall be handled. Caution shall be exercised when handling off-center loads which cannot be centered. Everyone who's operated for any amount of time knows you're going to get a ton of loads which are not centered. The trick for it is pick it up just a tiny bit, check where it leans, and set it back down and then readjust. And sometimes you have to do that like 5 or 10 times to find that center of gravity for the load. Don't overload the forklift, and keep in mind the higher the forks go, the less the load they can handle. The rating of the forklift is at the bottom, just barely off the ground, and with everything perfectly centered. That rating dramatically drops the higher the forks are in the air. So for non-normal forklift operators, you may not know that, but that 7,000 pound rating may not be 7,000 pounds when it gets in the air. Maybe something more like 3. If at any time a powered industrial truck is found to be in need of repair, defective, or in any way unsafe, the truck shall be taken out of service until it has been restored to safe operating condition. And the only person who can repair a forklift is an authorized person. Meaning you can't just have old Billy Bob, the warehouse manager, come over and fix that there hydraulic line. Powered platform, man lifts, and vehicle-mounted work platforms. I'm really going after scissor lift and boom lift here. And yes, you can rent a bottle jack lift from Home Depot. It includes those too. Anything that lifts a human being up potentially is in this category, and only trained person shall operate an aerial lift. Meaning, if you need to change the lights in your warehouse, you do not just grab a warehouse person and say, hey, I rented a lift, it's coming in a week, make sure you're ready, and then they go up and do it. They have to have training for that specific lift and potentially fall protection. People die on boom lifts and scissor lifts all the time. Just Google it, and you will see why we don't just send people up on a lift. They must have training first. All right, bloodborne pathogens, and we're going to go fast on this one. Exposure means a specific eye, mouth, or other mucous membrane, not intact skin, or parenteral contact with blood or other potentially infectious materials, right? Other thing, not just blood, but urine. There could be blood in the urine. Fecal matter, there could be blood in the poo. We don't know. So it's blood or anything that could potentially contain other people's blood that results from the performance of an employee's duties. So it's something that the employee was told to do or is expected to do, and they were exposed to poo, pee, or blood. Now, I predominantly work for electrical contractors, and we are not one of the high-risk groups. And because of that, we don't really have to have an exposure control plan other than a minor one in our safety manual, proving that our trade and our scope, our work, our tasks, our everything, we shouldn't be one of the at-risk groups. Thus, we have a generic exposure control plan in our safety manual. But we still do the assessments once a year just to make sure we're still in compliance. As this is generic training, you will need to assess whether you're one of those high-risk groups, and you have to have an elaborate or more robust or more specific exposure control plan. If you do have to have one, it will contain these specific elements: a place where you documented what your exposure level is, and then document annually consideration and implementation of appropriate commercially available and effective safer medical devices designed to eliminate or minimize occupational exposure. So your company think tank needs to get together and go, wait a minute, why are we still exposing people to stuff, and can we do this safer? Universal precaution, that is a fancy term for saying we treat everybody's infectious liquids like they're infected with the worst thing possible. We treat everybody's blood like it's radioactive. Poo, like it's radioactive. Urine, everything. We treat anything that came out of somebody's body like it's radioactive. Employers shall provide hand washing facilities which are readily accessible to employees. That bathroom with the soap and the water, that's not just you being nice to your people, that's an OSHA requirement. If there is a known exposure, employers shall ensure. This isn't employers shall recommend, employers shall suggest. This is you, the facility responsible, will ensure the employee washes their hands as soon as possible after removing gloves. Employers shall ensure that employees wash hands and any other skin with soap and water, or flush mucous membranes, that's like flushing out their eyes, their nose, their mouth, immediately or as soon as feasible following contact of such body areas with blood or potentially infectious materials. And again, based off of the universal precautions, if we got to clean something up, everything gets washed. Bloodborne pathogens continued. Anything that's bloody or nasty or whatever, and you're gonna throw it away, it needs to be put into a container that's not gonna leak. If there's a chance of whatever that stuff is punching through the container, perfect example is glass. An employee breaks a window or whatever, and there's glass and it's got their blood on it. You can't just throw it in a plastic bag. You have to throw it into like a box and then put the box in a plastic bag. Any equipment that we're not going to throw away, so like a forklift, if there's blood on that, you got to clean that. A label with the biohazard symbol must be attached to any waste that is potentially infectious. You as the employer have to ensure anyone cleaning up other people's blood has access to PPE. The big thing here is, well, wait a minute, you said it weird, you said other people's blood. Yes, because we don't need to deal with universal precautions if the person is cleaning up their own waste. We only need to make sure that the site is clean once they walk away, because they're already exposed to whatever they have. And that's why option number one is always, whoever the person is, they clean up their own waste and then they disinfect. But sometimes, and God forbid this happens, but sometimes whatever happened so bad that the person had to leave, either ambulance or own home or whatever, and we're left with the situation to clean up. If that's the case, you got to make sure they have access to PPE right now. When that person removes the PPE, they have to treat that PPE like it is also radioactive. This is part of universal precautions. Employers shall ensure that the worksite is maintained in a clean and sanitary condition. The employer shall determine and implement an appropriate written schedule for cleaning and method of decontamination based upon the location within the facility, type of surface to be cleaned, type of soil present, and tasks or procedures being performed in that area. This is telling you you have to have a bathroom cleaning plan as well as a building cleaning plan. Now, granted, most of our buildings are cleaned on Saturday by a cleaning crew or after hours by a cleaning crew, and that's fine. You can put that on there as the normal cleaning schedule. But the question is, what happens when something happens at 8 o'clock in the morning? Are we just going to shut the bathroom down? Or are we going to clean it up because we have to keep those bathrooms open, again, according to OSHA regulations. We have to comply with having X amount of bathrooms open. And so we also have to have a plan for how to clean things other than Saturday. And that is you as the facility responsible. And it is a plan for cleaning, not just a use the chemicals in the bathroom. No, it's got to be more than that. It's got to be use this chemical for cleaning the floors, use this chemical and this type of brush for cleaning the mirrors, so on and so on and so forth. You are telling them how to clean the bathroom, not just get it done. More bloodborne pathogens. All equipment and environmental and working surfaces shall be disinfected post-event. Any work surface shall be decontaminated with an appropriate disinfectant after completion of procedures. So once we're done dealing with whatever the event is, you need to start cleaning those work surfaces ASAP. Contaminated laundry shall be handled as little as possible. I'm telling you, you're either going to have the employee pick up their laundry, put it in a trash bag and take it to their own vehicle, or if they're not on facility, you're going to take it and put it in a bag, put that little biohazard thing on the side of it, and then the employee's going to come get their stuff. We shouldn't have to do laundry with our scope of work. For whatever reason, let's say you have Billy Bob come in and he's cleaning up Miguel's bloody situation. Well, Billy Bob splashes blood on himself. Okay, now we have to, as an employer, take care of Billy Bob's laundry, and contaminated laundry shall be bagged and containerized at the location where it was used and shall not be sorted or rinsed. You can't just go in the bathroom and clean it off. Period. Again, universal precautions, that is now radioactive laundry. Billy Bob can't have that. You may be able to find a laundromat that'll clean stuff for you like this. Otherwise, all that stuff now belongs to Miguel because it's Miguel's blood. And we're just going to buy Billy Bob some new clothes. And yes, this includes boots. And then the question is, well, wait a minute. I've got Billy Bob sitting here with Miguel's blood all over his clothing. How am I going to, because remember it said, and doesn't leave the facility. So how am I going to get Billy Bob a change of clothes without him leaving? See, this is where having PPE to where the employee doesn't risk getting anything on their clothes is kind of important. You might want to look at having some kind of a smock or something that the employee can put on so they never have any kind of potential of getting blood on their clothes. And like I said, this includes boots. The employer shall make available the hepatitis B vaccine and vaccination series to all employees who have occupational exposure. So this is a situation of if we know there was a hepatitis B exposure, most likely your safety department or your HR, if you're a big enough company, will come down and get involved in this because this involves things like HIPAA, what you can and can't say, and it especially involves record keeping up to 10 to 30 years depending on the exposure. And the hep vaccinations must be made at no cost to the employees. And if you're wondering, well, why in the world are we going so deep into this training? It's real simple. The employer shall train each employee with occupational exposure in accordance with the requirements of this section. You as the facility responsible are getting training because there is a potential exposure that your employee, especially in the warehouse, could hurt themselves and blood could hit the ground. OSHA says you have to get training, and now you have to train your people under it as well. You have to train them when they're initially assigned and at least annually. We will take care of the generic thing because we're not working in a high-risk area. We'll take care of the generic training with yearly employee training. And this is one of the reasons why you, as the facility responsible, need to be pushing your office people to get their training done every year, as well as your construction people every year. The training program shall consist of an accessible copy of the regulation text of this standard and an explanation of its content, meaning we have to give them the OSHA reg and explain it. A general explanation of epidemiology and symptoms of bloodborne diseases, thus the entire beginning of the bloodborne pathogen class. An explanation of the modes of transmission, again, that's covered at the second part of the class. An explanation of the employer's exposure control plan, which we don't really have to dig into because we're not in a high-risk group, but we do touch it a little bit. An explanation of the appropriate methods for recognizing tasks which could expose you to it. Again, the only place, because of our such low risk, is going to be the bathroom, or it could be hand and power tools. An explanation of the controls. So the blood's over there. What is the control method? Well, the control method that we are going to train all of our employees for is don't go near it. If there's poo on the floor, don't go near it. If there's blood on the floor, don't go near it. We will only train specific people to be able to handle it. So the use and limitations and methods, very simple. If you even suspect, you don't go near it. And then the proper use of PPE and disposal, so on and so forth. These are the people that we are training within our facility to actually go clean that stuff up. You've got to train them on how to decontaminate their own clothing. Bloodborne pathogens continued, and specifically what we have to train our employees on, an explanation of the basis for selecting PPE. Again, we train our people what to do or what not to do. We're going to train them all to run away, except for specific people. Information on the hepatitis B vaccine, we have to educate people on that. Information on the appropriate actions to take and persons to contact in an emergency involving blood or anything nasty. An explanation of the post-incident procedures involving blood. So if they're exposed to blood, what's going to happen? If there is an incident involving blood in that employee, what's going to happen? And medical evaluations following that. We must educate him that that red biohazard sign means this is blood, leave it alone. And yes, an opportunity for interactive questions and answers with the person conducting this training. And if you feel like you're getting an excessive amount of training, it's because the person conducting the training shall be knowledgeable in the subject matter covered by the elements contained in the training program. And you're the primary contact for that employee. They're going to come ask you questions and you're going to be responsible for implementing it. You have to know all this. So if it feels like we're beating the living tarnation out of bloodborne pathogens, it's because you have to know this stuff. And any exposure record we have to maintain for 30 years. Here's a fun one. Bloodborne pathogens Sharps injury log. The employer shall establish and maintain a Sharps injury log for the recording of percutaneous injuries from contaminated sharps. The information in the Sharps injury log shall be recorded and maintained in such a manner as to protect the confidentiality of the injured employee. The Sharps injury log shall contain at a minimum and a whole bunch of stuff. There are a lot of examples of Sharps injury logs all over the internet. Just look them up, make sure they're compliant, and use it. And now we're moving into medical services and first aid generic. The employer shall ensure the ready availability of medical personnel for advice and consultation on matters of plant health. Plant health is just facility, but we have to be able to take our employees to the doctor, to a clinic. There's no such thing as, oh, we ain't going to the doctor. Nah, you're good. Just throw some dirt on it. Walk it off. That's not acceptable for employees. You cannot deny medical care to an injured employee. I get this question a lot. Do we have to have CPR and first aid training? And what the regulation states is, in the absence of an infirmary, clinic, or hospital in the near proximity to the workplace, which is used for the treatment of all injured employees, a person or persons shall be adequately trained to render first aid. So it's pretty simple. Unless there's other rules, like if you're electrical, NFPA 7E says any electrician's doing work, especially around live stuff, you've got to have CPR first aid. But as long as there's no other rules that tell you you have to have CPR first aid, according to OSHA, if you've got a clinic right down the road, you don't have to have CPR first aid on site. But there is a separate sentence hidden in here, and that is, adequate first aid supplies shall be readily available. Every person who has to comply with 1910 and has a facility, you have to have first aid supplies. Where the eyes or body of any person may be exposed to injurious corrosive materials, suitable facilities for quick drenching or flushing of the eyes and body shall be provided within the work area for immediate emergency use. This is why you have a whole separate eye wash bottle. That way there's no question we are complying with 1910-151 Charlie. And yes, I know you have a sink, and I know that sink is accessible. I got it. But what happens when somebody's in that bathroom and the door's locked? Can we still get to that sink? And that's why just having it out in the warehouse, 2 bottles of eye wash, we're good to go. It's literally a $50 fix, and you'll never have an issue. We're going to swing over real quick, and we're going to talk about OSHA 1904, which everybody, maritime, mining, construction, office, everybody has to comply with. And this is how to classify and how to handle injuries. Now, a lot of this information is going to be handled and mitigated by the safety department and or the HR department if you're a big enough company. But just for your own ability to do what you need to do, you got to have a topical amount of information. So just hang on. We're going to get through this real quick. The word OSHA recordable is a term, and that means we have to tell OSHA about it. And if an employee dies, we have to tell OSHA. If an employee has days away from work, we have to tell OSHA. But also, here's a Q&A part in 1904. Well, what happens if the doctor tells an employee, you need to go to work, but the employee just doesn't come to work? We don't just make up our own policy. We follow, in this situation, you must end the count of days away from work on the date the physician or other licensed health care professional recommends that the employee returns to work. So the employee doesn't just get to stay home, and we're going to keep counting it as an OSHA recordable, meaning their pay stops because they've just decided not to come to work. If someone is currently on injury status with an OSHA recordable and they quit or they get fired, immediately it's no longer an OSHA recordable that we're still counting. But keep in mind, this is so long as they quit and not related to the injury. If they quit because of the injury in any way, shape, or form, this doesn't apply. We're still counting days. And good luck getting someone who doesn't work for you anymore to keep going to them doctor's appointments. But assuming it was unrelated to the injury, whatever the day is they quit or got fired, that is where we stop counting the injury days. But I'm going to caution you, before you fire somebody that has an active ongoing injury, you need to make absolute sure you're ready to deal with the consequences of that decision to fire someone who's currently on an active injury. If they have restricted work, that is an OSHA recordable, and we have to tell OSHA. And this is the meat. If you assign an injured or ill employee to a job other than their regular job for part of the day, that case involves transfer to another job. Thus, it is a recordable. Now, there is a footnote here. This does not include the day on which the injury or illness occurred. So especially if someone had a situation and it freaked them out, okay, today, come on down, you're off of ladders. But if we're saying you can't get on ladders for the rest of the month because of this injury, that's an OSHA recordable. As a division manager or facility responsible, the way you word things to an employee can make it be an OSHA recordable. Your verbiage and your actions can turn the injury into so bad we have to tell OSHA about it. Now, keep in mind, all of this is based off of an injury. If there was no injury and you're just changing their job description, even temporarily, just to take care of the person, good to go. That's fine. A real good situation of this would be if we have a 20-year-old and a 60-year-old, who should be climbing the ladder? Well, probably the 20-year-old. Now, I changed that 60-year-old's job description in a very micro way, agreed, but it has nothing to do with an injury. It has to do with, this dude's 60, do I really want him at the top of a ladder? Does that make sense? All the things I'm telling you are based off of an injury. If you do this thing because of an injury that an employee suffered at work, now, without even seeing a doctor, you're making it a recordable. Now, if you have any follow-up questions on this or you need more definitions and explanations, I understand. This is definitely, in my entire existence of safety, the number one place where there are too many shades of gray. What may be, what might be, what could be, it's confusing, and I get it. But also keep in mind, I'm just some random dude on the internet. I don't know what state rules you have, what other things, your specific labor law situations that have additional things that could turn it into a recordable. I strongly recommend you talk to a subject matter expert in navigating through employee injury. This could be labor law, it could be occupational safety, it could be a lawyer. I definitely recommend you pull somebody else in to help you figure this out. Now, if the issue is exactly what constitutes changing their work, OSHA's answer to that is if you keep the employee from performing one or more of the routine functions of his or her job or working the full day that he or she would otherwise have been scheduled to work. So if you restrict their amount of work or you restrict what they're doing. Now, you can definitely say, hey, why don't you go do trim for a couple of days instead of doing rough? You know what I mean? You're taking care of your person. Those are both within the confines of their actual job. But pulling someone who has worked 150 days straight out in the field, pulling them into the warehouse to push a broom, that is absolutely restricting work. Be careful what you do. You being nice and trying to take care of our employee can definitely cause it to be a recordable. And obviously, if a physician puts them on light duty, it's a recordable. So there are 3 types of injuries. It's just an owie. It's just a thing that happened. It kind of hurts a little bit, but we don't think we need medical treatment. We don't need first aid. We'll just see how it goes. And then number 2 is a first aid. And then number 3 is a recordable. This is an entire list of everything that is considered first aid. And anything else is considered a recordable. Now notice the word first aid. If any of these things happen, you need to record this on your first aid log for your facility. And that is non-prescription medication, right? So over-the-counter ibuprofen, the stuff in the first aid kit, a tetanus shot, cleaning, flushing, or soaking a wound on the surface, using wound coverings such as bandages, band-aids, so again, using stuff out of the first aid kit, using hot or cold therapy, using any non-rigid means of support such as elastic bandages, a non-rigid back belt, any kind of that wrapping something up, temporary immobilization device. This is specifically like an ambulance ride where they put a back brace on them to get them to the hospital. That is still first aid. Drilling of a fingernail or a toenail to relieve pressure, or draining fluid from a blister, like literally a blood blister. We've all had one of those. Using an eye patch. Removing foreign bodies from the eye using only irrigation or a cotton swab. Removing splinters of foreign material from areas other than eye by irrigation tweezers. So pulling out a regular splinter, first aid. Using a finger guard, first aid. Using massages. So if you're giving your people massages, that counts as a first aid. Drinking fluids for relief of heat stress, first aid. Any other procedures included in first aid? No. This is a complete list. Everything else is a recordable. And of course, a loss of consciousness. If an employee blacks out or they get knocked out, that is absolutely a recordable. And the final recordable is a significant injury or illness diagnosed by a physician or other licensed healthcare professional. So if they get diagnosed, meaning this is a chronic thing, like this person has mesothelioma, that's a recordable. If it's directly tied back to your work. Eye and face protection. The employer shall ensure that each affected employee uses appropriate eye or face protection when exposed to flying particles, molten metal, liquid chemicals, acids or caustic liquids, chemical gases, vapors, or potentially injurious light. And just having safety glasses or glasses on is not good enough. They must have side shields. And this is specifically stating, including glasses, regular glasses, you gotta have side shields. And eye and face PPE shall be distinctly marked to facilitate identification of the manufacturer. And they have to be ANSI Z87 rated. But you can make allowances if you can demonstrate that it is at least as effective as the Z87s. A very good example of this would be the military Wiley X glasses. Those are ballistic rated safety glasses, which are better than ANSI Z87s. Foot protection. The employer shall ensure that each affected employee uses protective footwear when working in areas when there's a danger of foot injuries due to falling or rolling objects or objects piercing the sole or some kind of an electrical thing. Footwear must comply with ANSI Z41. And again, the same thing as eyes. If you can demonstrate that that footwear is as or better protective as ANSI Z41, then good to go. Perfect example of this would be tennis shoes that come out that are steel-toe tennis shoes. Maybe those are acceptable. You need to take them on a case-by-case basis. Hand protection. Employers shall select and require employees to use appropriate hand protection when employees their hands are blah, blah, blah. Severe cuts, lacerations, severe abrasions, punctures, chemical burns, thermal burns, harmful temperature extremes. And this whole section here, this is just a fancy way of saying, look at the hazard the guys are going to be exposed to, and then choose hand protection that'll protect them. Head protection. The employer shall ensure that each affected employee wears a protective helmet when working in areas where there is a potential for injury to the head from falling objects. If there is a chance of electric shock, then they have to have an E-rated helmet, an E-rated hard hat. Head protection must comply with ANSI Z89. And then again, same sentence as before, if there is some other version of a hard hat and you think it's good to go, but it's not rated, If it is at least or better than ANSI Z89, then we're good to go. Again, case by case basis. Occupational noise exposure, or sounds. When employees are subject to sound exceeding those listed on table G16, you gotta do something. This is table G16, and on the left side, you'll see how many hours a day you can expose a person to it, and then on the right side is how loud it can be. So if you measure a sound, let's say 100, you can expose an employee to it for 2 hours for the whole course of the day. And you may say, Shelby, I don't know how to measure decibels. Not a problem. Go to your favorite online store, type in sound decibel meter, and you'll get a $25 one that pops up. This is dirt cheap. This is 1910s, literally 1910s technology. And just to kind of give you an idea of what the decibel rating is equivalent, 60 to 70, something around there, is normal conversation voice. A lawnmower running is about 100 decibels. Then we get up into leaf blowers, an airplane jet at takeoff, a gunshot. Now, this isn't perfect science. Some will be louder, some will be softer. This is just a broad idea of what those sound decibels are based off of the sounds that you know in your mind. If those sounds are X amount of loud, you need to do things. You could limit the employee's time exposed to it, or put in PPE, things like ear muffs or earplugs, that kind of stuff. Personal fall protection systems, or fall protection. Lanyards and vertical lifelines must be rated at 5,000 pounds. D-rings, snap hooks, and carabiners must be rated at 5,000 pounds. Anchor points must be rated at 5,000 pounds. Horizontal tie-off lines, they must be rated for 5,000 pounds per employee attached to it. So pretty much everything must be rated at 5,000 pounds. This includes the anchor point itself, 5,000 pounds per employee attached to it. So everything's rated at 5,000 pounds per person. And this says it's literally your job as the employer to make sure all fall protection is rated at 5,000 pounds. Now, just as a caveat, there are situations where we can have things rated less than 5,000 pounds, but those are very niche situations or specific pieces of fall protection that don't allow you to fall. If you want to use something like that, talk to the competent person for fall protection for your company to see if that's acceptable for you. Now, the 5,000 pounds is how much everything must be rated to, but the actual system you're using can't just bring an employee to a screeching halt. It must limit the maximum arresting force on the employee to 1,800 pounds. What this is telling you is great. This one anchor point is rated at 5,000 pounds, but we're using a 7 or an 8 foot lanyard that slams the employee to a screeching halt. They didn't hit the ground, but they might as well have, because you took them from 75 miles an hour falling to a screeching halt. You must limit the maximum arresting force on the employee to 1,800 pounds. Fall protection must bring the employee to a complete stop and limit the maximum deceleration distance, right? So how far they're slowing down before they stop to 3.5 feet maximum. Overall, as a rule of thumb, all fall protection must have sufficient strength to withstand twice the potential impact. Not the weight of the employee, the impact at a distance falling of 6 feet. And nothing in the fall protection system can touch the employee's chin or neck ever. Personal protective equipment, general requirements. So this, all the PPE that we've talked about just before, plus any other stuff you might use, these rules apply to everything you could ever put on an employee to protect them. It shall be provided, used, and maintained in a sanitary and reliable condition, however you're using it, to protect from whatever hazard. All PPE shall be of safe design and construction for the work to be performed. It's the employer's job to look at the area and or task to see if PPE needs to be used. And the employer has to actually use PPE that will really protect the employee. The employer has to tell the employee, this is the hazard and this is the PPE that we've chosen to protect you from it. It has to properly fit, so no giant gloves on someone with small hands. When you do look at the work area, the employer shall verify that the required workplace hazard assessment has been performed through a written certification, and it needs to identify the workplace, the name of the person doing the evaluation, the date, and the document itself must say it's a hazard assessment. To put it in a nutshell, it's a facility audit that specifically addresses hazards that are in that location and what PPE is being used, and is it acceptable, is it adequate, is it being taken care of, all that stuff. Defective or damaged PPE shall not be used. PPE general requirements continued. The employer shall provide training to each employee who is required by this section to use PPE. They shall be trained when the PPE is necessary, what PPE is necessary, how to properly put it on and adjust it, what the limitations of the PPE are, how to take care of it, how to maintain of it, and then how to dispose of it properly. And they have to demonstrate that they understand this before they're allowed to use that PPE. When the employer has reason to believe that any affected employee who has already been trained does not have the understanding and skills required, then you got to retrain them. This could include changes in the workplace, changes in the PPE, or you see someone doing something wrong with the PPE. And PPE shall be provided at no cost to the employee. None. They don't pay for their safety glasses, they don't pay for their gloves, they don't pay for their hard hats, they don't pay for anything that you are issuing to them. PPE general requirements continued. The employer is not required to pay for non-specialty safety toe protective footwear, including steel toes or steel toe boots, and prescription safety glasses, provided the employee is allowed to take them off-site. The employer is also not required to pay for everyday clothing such as long sleeve shirts, long pants, street clothes, normal work boots, or ordinary clothing, sun creams, other items used solely for protection from the weather, jackets, coats, rubber boots, hats, raincoats, anything that has to do with the weather. And here's a big one. The employer must pay for replacement PPE, right? So you gave them safety glasses and they bring them back and they're like, hey boss, these things are damaged. You got to replace them. But if they lose them or if they intentionally damage them, you don't have to pay for that. You can tell the employee, go get it. Now, you can't tell them, go work, deal with the hazard without PPE, but you can tell them, go to the store and buy an exact replacement equal to or better than what I gave you. Respiratory protection, and this is going to be a huge section. So the main reason we're getting into this is A, that way you know. If there's this situation, you know what needs to be done. But the other reason is, before you put a respirator on your people's faces, you need to understand all the things, all the hoops we're going to have to jump through before you do that. So I'm going to go pretty fast through this section, but please understand, this is extreme. When you want to put respirators on our people, now we're going to get crazy. Now, when we talk about respirators, most people think this, and yes, that is a respirator, but so are these. You see all this writing here? If you read it, it'll tell you respirator. If you look at it, it will tell you it's a particulate respirator, an N95. So if it's got a number attached to it, or if it says the word respirator, it's a respirator. So before you go down to Home Depot and you get some paint because you want to paint your office or you want to do whatever you want to do and you grab some respirators, this is the section you need to look at and make sure you're willing to shave all your people's faces. Every day they need to wear it because these are tight-fitting respirators. Or we can spend quadruple the money and put them in loose-fitting respirators where maybe they don't have to shave. Now, I don't know the specifications on this exact one. Check the manufacturer's recommendations. Both of these require medical evaluation, which is where they check the lung capacity of your employee, and then fit testing, which is where they test to see if it fits the employee and they're making a good seal, and then they can still breathe. All that's coming next applies to both of these. This first one says, we don't just want to protect our people, we want to protect everyone else too. We don't want to just throw crap up into the air. And that is why, instead of using respirators, we want to use, especially for drilling concrete, we want to use a HEPA vacuum attached to the drill because it protects everybody, not just the employee. This is OSHA telling you don't just slap respirators on people. Now, if engineering controls do not reduce the hazard down for the employee enough, now we need to start using what's called a respirator protection program. Respiratory protection continued. The respirator protection program must be in writing and include worksite specific procedures. It must be administered by a suitably trained program administrator. And this section here is telling you if there's a place where the employer is requiring respirators to protect the employees, they have to use the respirator protection program, including procedures for selecting the respirator to be used, medical evaluations of employees required to use the respirators, fit testing procedures for the tight-fitting respirators, and procedures for proper use of respirators in routine and reasonably foreseeable emergency situations. Continuing on with the respiratory protection program requirements, in writing there have to be procedures and schedules for cleaning, disinfecting, storing, inspecting, repairing, discarding, and otherwise maintaining respirators. Procedures to ensure adequate air quality, quantity, and flow of breathing air for atmospheric supplying respirators. Those are the ones you see firemen wearing. Training of employees in the respiratory hazards to which they are potentially exposed during routine and emergency situations. Training of employees in the proper use of respirators, including putting it on and removing them, any limitations on their use and their maintenance, and procedures for regularly evaluating the effectiveness of the program. Now, this is a small snapshot right here of what happens if an employee comes up and says, hey, I want to use my own respirator just because. Not because of the hazards, because then we would have to make them use a respirator, but an employee just wants to. This is called the voluntary respirator use, and they can utilize it, but a strong recommendation is look in 1910-134 Charlie 2 and look for Appendix D, and there is a specific little standard that covers it and even a form you could have people sign off on. Respiratory protection continued. Now, this is an unnecessarily long section here, but what it's really getting at is if you're going to use respirators, you have to use a respiratory protection program, but the employees that are voluntarily doing it, not because of a hazard, but because they just want to, now you don't have to use the respiratory protection program if it's specifically on the filtering face piece dust masks. The ones that I showed you the pictures of, and I said these two, if it's those and the employee just decides they want to use it, then you don't have to activate the written respiratory protection program. A perfect example of what they're trying to get at with this was the COVID-19 pandemic thing, and where everybody's running around with respirators on. And the big question is, who's going to train them? Where's the medical evaluation? Where's the fit testing? Well, we don't have to escalate that up because the employee is taking it upon themselves to wear a respirator. This is also one of the reasons, in my opinion, why you didn't see a bunch of people saying you have to wear a respirator. You saw the government coming out saying some kind of a face covering. Because if they tried to say respirators were required, now you have a problem of now they have to have fit testing. Now they have to have medical evaluation. Now they have to have a whole bunch of stuff. And who's going to do it? Because the government's requiring it just for them to walk in a gas station. So that is a perfect situation of the employee comes to work, they're wearing a mask just because, and now we don't have to activate the written respiratory protection program. Now, if they come to work wearing a scuba mask, that's a different ballgame. The employer shall designate a program administrator who is qualified by appropriate training or experience, and they have to maintain the program as well as reevaluate the program. Respirators, training, and the medical evaluations are at no cost to the employee. Respirators have to be NIOSH certified, which remember that N95, I said the big number and all that? The N stands for NIOSH, NIOSH certified respirator. And it has to be used in accordance with the specifications laid out in its certification, which you can find out if you just read the piece of paper that comes with it or the box. Medical evaluations. Now, this whole first section is saying respirators can block people's ability to breathe, especially when they're doing work. So in order to make sure you're not impeding your employees' ability to work and breathe, they have to get a medical evaluation. Respiratory protection continued. Now this part is saying before you let them get fit tested and before you make them wear the respirator, they have to get a medical evaluation. And these are the procedures of the medical evaluation. So here you have physician or other licensed healthcare professional, PLHCP. I'm just going to say the doctor. So when you hear me say the doctor, I'm referring to this acronym. The employer shall identify the doctor using a medical questionnaire or an initial medical examination that obtains the same information as the medical questionnaire. You have to go interview the doctor. And the questionnaire has a whole bunch of very specific questions. We're not going to go through them here. Just understand, these aren't just random questions you're asking. These are specific questions. And these questions are going to be carried over to every employee that comes in for the medical examination. And during that medical evaluation, if that employee marks yes or positive in any of those specific sections, they have to come back for a reevaluation. And the follow-up medical examination shall include any medical tests, consultations, or diagnostic procedures that the doctor deemed necessary to make a final determination of whether they can even wear a respirator or not. That medical examination is confidential. It must be done during normal working hours. You can't have them, hey, on your way home tonight. No. It's got to be, if their shift is from 8 to 4, it's got to be from 8 to 4. And it's got to be administered in such a way that the employee understands its content, meaning it's got to be in the language and at the education level that that employee is going to understand. More respiratory protection. The employer shall provide the employee with an opportunity to discuss the questionnaire and examination results with the doctor. The doctor must be provided with the following information before they make a decision on the employee's ability to use a respirator. Type and weight of the respirator to be used by the employee. So that means this exact medical examination is tied specifically to the part number on that box or on that respirator. You can't just flippy floppy, because if you flippy floppy, you keep choosing different respirators, now you got to get another medical examination over and over and over again. So you might want to stick with the same type. The duration and frequency of respirator use, including for rescue and escape. The expected physical work effort, meaning how hard are they going to be working in this thing. Additional protective clothing and equipment that might be worn. And the temperature and humidity extremes that might be encountered. All of this has to be delivered at every single medical examination, unless it's the exact same from the previous medical examination for that specific employee. The employer has to give the doctor a copy of the written respiratory protection program and a copy of this regulation. And when you decide to change doctors, now you have to deliver all of that information to the new doctor or have the old doctor send it over to the new doctor. But OSHA's right here stating just because you change doctors doesn't mean you have to redo all the things. It's just as it comes available or as it comes up on its annual cycle. In determining the employee's ability to use a respirator, the employer shall, this doesn't say the doctor, this says you, facility responsible, division manager, shall obtain a written recommendation regarding the employee's ability to use the respirator from the doctor, and the only things written on it will be any limitations on respirator use related to the medical condition of the employee or relating to the workplace conditions in which the respirator will be used, including whether or not the employee is medically able to use the respirator at all. It'll also have the need for any follow-up medical evaluations, a statement that the doctor has provided the employee with a copy of the doctor's written recommendation. This section's talking about a negative or positive pressure tight-fitting face piece. And to make it simple for you, traditionally, these are the negative pressure ones and these are the positive pressure ones. So it's talking about those N95 respirators. And this is where OSHA is spelling it out that it must be fit tested with the same make, model, style, and size that the employee will actually be using. And this section is talking about tight-fitting face piece respirators, which all of these are tight-fitting face piece respirators. These over here, these are loose-fitting, like sandblasting and that kind of thing, which the N95 is definitely a tight-fitting face piece respirator, and it requires the employee pass an appropriate qualitative fit test or quantitative fit test. And they have to be fit tested before they use it, and then at least every year afterwards. More respiratory protection. The employer shall conduct an additional fit test whenever the employee, the employer, the doctor, the supervisor, or the program administrator, for whatever reason, believe that fit test is no longer good. This could include things like facial scarring, any kind of an injury, dental changes, cosmetic surgery, or any obvious change in body weight. You got to do a fit test again. If after the fit test, the employee notifies the employer, program administrator, supervisor, or doctor that the fit test of the respirator is unacceptable, the employee shall be given a reasonable opportunity to select a different respirator face piece and be retested. OSHA does not give any wiggle room in here. It is the employee comes up and says it is unacceptable, you got to give him a different respirator and let him retest. The fit test has to be according to OSHA accepted protocols, and you can look in Appendix A to see that. Respirators have to be clean, sanitary, and in good working order. Appendix B2 of this section has all of the actual procedures for that. Or you can use the manufacturer's manual on how to clean it as long as it is at least or better than what OSHA is telling you to do. Respirators have to be cleaned and disinfected as often as necessary to be maintained in a sanitary condition. We do not clean the respirators at the end of the day. They have to stay clean and sanitary so the employee can breathe and stay in accordance with the fit test and medical evaluation. And finally, the last page of respiratory protection, training and information. If you're going to have your people in respirators, you got to train them, and that training has to be comprehensive, understandable, and recur annually. So you got to do it every year, or more often as necessary. But there's a section here. This paragraph also requires the employer to provide basic information on respirators in Appendix D of this section to employees who wear respirators when not required by this section or by the employer to do so. So this covers those people who are just randomly wearing an N95 respirator just because they want to, especially during the COVID era. Everybody who was wearing a respirator to protect themselves from a virus out at the gas stations, the employer had to give them this piece of paper that you're seeing on the screen right here. This is Appendix D. This section says the employer shall evaluate the workplace to ensure that the written respiratory protection program is being properly implemented and talk to the employees to make sure that they're using the PPE properly. And again, the employer shall conduct evaluations of the workplace to ensure that respirators are being used correctly and that it's effective. The employer has to retain all of the information regarding medical evaluations, fit testing, and the respirator program. Records of medical evaluations shall be retained as per 29 CFR 1910-1020, which is HAZCOM Hazmat, and we've already covered that. But in a nutshell, if there was an exposure, it's 30 years. The employer has to maintain a record of the qualitative and the quantitative fit tests that were administered, and the fit test itself has to be retained until the next fit test is administered. And finally, moving on to something else, safety color code for marking physical hazards. Red means danger. Anything for fire shall be red. Safety cans or other things that have flammable liquids shall be red. Danger signs shall be red. Anytime we're using emergency stop bars on hazardous machines like mills, blocks, flat iron works, whatever, they will be red. Any emergency stops on any kind of machinery, that will be red. And then we get into yellow. Yellow is for caution. Specifications for accident prevention signs and tags. This is a whole big mess of a sentence, and I'm gonna make it real simple. If somebody can get hurt accidentally, whether it's a worker or the public or both, then these rules apply. The only exception to this are street signs, highway signs, and railroad signs, because your state's Department of Transportation will have jurisdiction there, not OSHA. OSHA controls the employees, DOT controls the roads. And this regulation does not apply to bulletin boards or safety posters like up in a break room, that kind of thing. All of your signs have to be free from sharp projections, splinters, burrs, that kind of thing. Danger signs, you cannot deviate from this regulation. All employees must be told that danger signs indicate immediate danger. So red equals danger equals you might die. Danger signs shall be red, black, and white as per Table 1 of ANSI Z53 1 1967, or any of these other regulations. Caution signs, again, warn against a potential hazard. You might get hurt. Danger, red, you will get hurt. Caution, yellow, you might get hurt. Accident prevention signs continued. All employees shall be instructed that caution signs indicate a possible hazard. The standard color of the background shall be yellow and the panel black with yellow letters. Again, go check ANSI Z53 1 1967. Safety instruction signs shall be used where there is a need for general instruction and suggestions relative to safety. Standard color of the background shall be white and the panel green with white letters. Again, ANSI Z53 1 1967. Accident prevention tags. No, you cannot just handwrite some little thing and throw it over on a machine or in an area to just warn people. They have to comply with OSHA standards. Accident prevention signs and tags continued. Tags shall be used as a means to prevent accidental injury or illness to employees who are exposed to hazardous or potentially hazardous conditions, equipment, or operations which are out of the ordinary, unexpected, or not readily apparent. You got to leave the tags up until the hazard is eliminated. If you have a sign up, you don't need to put a tag. If you have guarding up, you don't need to put a tag or some other means of nobody can get into that area. All tags must follow the below. They have to have a big giant word, danger, caution, biohazard, something like that, a big giant word. That is called the signal word, and it needs to be readable at 5 feet away or greater, depending on what the hazard itself is. Now, the major message, right, so the thing that you really want people to pay attention to can be either in words or pictograms or both. Don't confuse that with the signal word, the big giant word. The big giant word has to be there, and then the message has to be there, and they both need to be understandable to all employees who might be exposed. Before you start whipping out tags, you have to train everybody who could ever be in the area in your company that this is a tag and this is what it means. Tags need to be attached as close to the hazard as possible. That way nobody gets confused what the hazard is and what it's pointing towards. And it needs to be installed by some sturdy means to where it can't just blow away or accidentally fall off. Accident prevention signs and tags, specifically around tags. Danger tags shall be used in major hazard situations where an immediate hazard presents a threat of death or serious injury to employees. Caution tags shall be used in a minor hazard situation where a non-immediate or potential hazard or unsafe practice presents a lesser threat of employee injury. Warning is in between caution and danger. It's not quite a serious injury, but we want them to take a little bit more importance than just be careful, you might get hurt. Biological hazard tags shall be used to identify the actual or potential presence of a biological hazard and to identify equipment containers, rooms, experimental animals, or combinations thereof that contain or are contaminated with hazardous biological agents. The symbol for biological hazards is this. Now, this is a big one right here. It seems like a small thing. It's other tags, whatever. The big thing about this is do not make tags that get people blind to seeing your important tags. If you have other tags that are talking about spin cycles or talking about make sure to put the shovel up, do not let those tags make people to where they can't see the danger tags. It's called death by signage, and you can literally get people to where they're so used to seeing tags and signs and everything all over the place that they can't pay attention to the danger because they're constantly seeing them. Now, you are the facility responsible. You're the one responsible for all the signs in the building. So we're going to do a quick little, I know that was a lot, trust me. We're going to do a quick little run through so you can get a good idea of what we're talking about. Caution, watch for forklifts. This is a dude getting impaled by a forklift. That should be a danger sign. And it should be red, white, and black. Caution, wet floor. That should not be pink. That should be yellow. Toilet is blocked. Use at your own risk. No. The facility responsible must take control of the facility, including the signage. If a toilet is blocked, you must put up OSHA acceptable signage. A caution. This isn't going to kill somebody immediately. I could see a caution sign going up, but it needs to be warning anyone who goes in this room that there is a biological hazard potential in here. Maybe there's not stuff all over the place, or maybe there is. And that would tell you whether you need to put up a biological sign or a caution sign, or maybe both. This is a perfect example of the words should not detract from the sign itself. Warning, men at work. How is it in between you might die and you might get hurt? Isn't that a you might die thing? Shouldn't that be danger, men at work? But also, warning is only for tags, not for signs. This looks like a sign that you'd put up. It should either be danger or caution, and that's it when it comes to signage. And orange is not a color at all. It is either red or yellow or green. There is an exception for blue out there, but those are the main colors. Orange is actually for road construction per DOT, and you better have more than a piece of paper out there if you're doing that. This is almost a perfect sign. Danger, fall protection required. But it's not telling you that there's a fall hazard. I know it sounds silly to, like I'm splitting hairs here, but danger, fall hazard. And then an additional instruction sign telling people fall protection is required. What they did is they mixed two signs. They mixed a hazard sign with an instructional sign. Now, if I was walking a building and I saw this, I wouldn't nail it, but you're getting taught and you ain't going to be loose. You're going to be taught by the end of this class. Attention. And I don't even care what it says after that. Attention is not a big word. It is danger. It is caution. Those are the two words. And you could say, well, this is just a funny sign. Oh, ha, ha, ha. Okay, but then why is it black, white, and red? That's the violation here. These are the kind of signs that make employees stop paying attention to signs. Now, I know this one's silly, but again, warning, no stupid people. This is an instructional being used on an actual warning sign. What is the hazard? Don't tell me what to do on a warning sign. Tell me what the hazard is. And the complete opposite over here, you're telling me what the hazard is and that it can kill me on yellow and red, which that's just mixing caution and danger. Caution tomatoes on a red sign. I'm not entirely sure how tomatoes are going to hurt me or even that I should be careful. I know some of those were silly, but the big takeaway from this is please don't just throw random signs up. You're going to make your people ignore the important ones. Pay attention to what you're doing and please put the signs up when you need to. Abrasive wheel machinery, so this is like grinders and things like that. Safety guards shall cover the spindle end, nut, and flange projections. So the safety guard needs to cover the big chunk of what's spinning. A good example of this would be a stationary that also has a little plastic screen that's protecting the actual person while they're grinding to where Even if everything explodes, it's not going to hit the person. Now, there is an exception to this rule where everything on a grinder has to be covered up, and that is where we usually see a portable grinder that only has a protector that covers one side. And that is usually the side pointed towards the operator, but you need to be very careful because only the operator is protected, nobody else. So especially if you have a helper, nobody else is protected, only the operator. Go check 1910.215A2 to get the specifications on exactly when you don't have to have that entire process enclosed. Inspection. Immediately before mounting, all wheels shall be closely inspected and sounded by the user using a ring test. If you don't know what a ring test is, there's tons of videos all over the place that you can find one easily. Just type in grinder ring test and you can see exactly how that looks. You have to check the actual spindle before you mount the disc, and you have to use the right disc at the right speed. I've seen a fair share of grinding and cutoff discs explode, and almost every single time it's because the machine is operating at a gazillion rotations, but the wheel is only rated for half that. And so as that thing spins up and keeps going faster and faster and it makes contact with something, it explodes. Because they're not using the right wheel with the right machine. Just because it can fit on that machine doesn't mean it's rated for that rotation. And finally, the last 1910 significance section, and I wanted this one to come last because this is the #1 most violated thing that I've ever seen in 1910. That's why we saved it for last. Walking working surfaces, ladders. This section applies to all ladders, except when used in an emergency thing like firefighting, rescue, tactical law enforcement, or if it's part of an integral part of a machine, like there's a ladder going up on the side of a machine built by the manufacturer, it falls under different specifications. All ladders that I haven't previously stated, surfaces must be free of puncture and laceration hazards. No sharps and no stabbies. Ladders are only used for the purposes for which they were designed. Nobody on the top step, nobody on the second to top step, no leaning an A-frame ladder against the wall unless it's designed to be used that way. No two people on a ladder unless it's designed to be used that way. It has to be flat because that's the way it was designed to be used. No using it as a bridge, no using it as a wire spool. Ladders are inspected before initial use in each work shift and more frequently as necessary. If a ladder is damaged with structural or other defects, it is immediately tagged out, danger, do not use. If for whatever reason you do not have a danger tag or a danger sign to stick on there immediately, at the very worst, wrap it up with red danger tape. There's tons of it all over the place. Grab some red danger tape and flag that thing. Not caution tape, because we don't want people to be careful while they're using the broken ladder. We want them not to use it, meaning don't use it, meaning this broken ladder could kill you. Red danger tape only. Do not overload ladders. Yes, ladders have a maximum intended load. Specifically, Warner ladder load ratings are based off of the color. When I see a 300-pound man like myself climbing up on a blue Warner ladder, you're overloading the ladder. It's not rated for your weight. And finally, OSH Act of 1970. This thing, as of the recording of this date, has been around for 50 years. So it has been around for a very long time. And this is OSHA's way of saying, even if we don't have a rule out there, you still have to take care of your people. Each employer shall furnish to each of his employees employment and a place of employment which are free from recognized hazards that are causing or are likely to cause death or serious physical harm to his employees. And then part 2 of this is just as encapsulating. Each employee shall comply with the occupational safety and health standards and all rules, regulations, and orders issued pursuant to this act. Meaning, you as the employer have OSHA backing you up. If you're going to make rules to keep those employees safe, they have to comply. They don't have the option of, I don't want to, not today, any of that. They have to comply. So overall, if there's not an OSHA regulation that specifically addresses scaffolding or excavations, whatever it is that you're dealing with, you still have to protect your people. Congratulations, you're done. I'm not going to waste any more of your time. Remember, talk to the competent person for your company, for your specific area, for your whatever you're dealing with. If you have any questions regarding anything that's been said here. God bless and have a great day.